12th of June, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll? Lost our clerk.
He'll be right down.
He's
He'll be
opening
right
the
back.
doors upstairs.
Okay, here he comes. Stephen, you're on.
Balcony's now open if anybody else
Thank you.
needs a seat.
Terrific.
Looking for a seat, the balcony. If anyone's looking for a seat, there's room in the balcony.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ruff,
Here.
Piedmont Smith,
Here.
Rollo,
Here.
Volin,
Here.
Sims,
Here.
Sandberg.
Here.
Thank you. I'll make the summation of the agenda this evening, and if you'd like a copy, you can find it beside the clerk. There are extra copies if you'd like to read along. We have approval of minutes for the 17th of April, 2019, the 15th of May, regular session, 29th of May, and June 5th, 2019. Then we'll go to reports from council members, and then we have 3 reports from the mayor and city offices this evening. The Bloomington Arts Commission and Bloomington Entertainment and Arts District has an annual report. We'll have the Innovation Director report, and then we'll have an introduction of Transportation Demand Management Consultant this evening before we go to council committee reports, and then we'll reserve 20 minutes for the public if you would like to speak on items not on our agenda at that point. We'll then go to appointments to boards and commissions, and then we have, for legislation for second reading and resolutions, we have 6 items. Those are Ordinance 1911 to amend Title 2 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel regarding amending Chapter 2.21 entitled Department of Law to prohibit discrimination and harassment of any person doing sanctioned work for the city, and that received a committee recommendation due pass 207. Second item is Resolution 1911, the Bloomington Youth for Environmental Sustainability. Yes. Society's Resolution for Environmental Responsibility and Improvement resolution. Item 3 is Resolution 1912 to review and approve the intra-category transfer and expenditure of $100,000 or more within a covered fund under Ordinance 1810, additional fiscal oversight of the Common Council regarding a $250,000 transfer from line 399, other services and charges, to line 396, grants, within the Housing Trust Fund, number 905, and expenditure of transferred funds. Item 4 of legislation for second reading and resolutions is Resolution 1909, that is authorizing the allocation of the Jack Hopkins Social Service Program funds for the year 2019 and related matters. Item 6 is Resolution 1910, waiving current payments in lieu of taxes, pilot by the Bloomington Housing Authority to the city. And then item 6 is Resolution 1908 to approve a revised cooperation agreement between the City of Bloomington, the city, and Bloomington Housing Authority, BHA, for provision and operation of low-income housing units and associated payment in lieu of taxes by BHA in exchange for city services. And that received the committee recommendation at our committee meeting of due pass 700. We have no legislation for first reading. We will go to additional public comments if you would like to. We have 20 minutes reserved for items not on our agenda at that time, and then we'll review our council schedule before we adjourn this evening. So with that, do we have approval of minutes? Anyone like to make a motion?
I move approval of the minutes. And before I finish my motion, I want to check if anybody wants to separate out any of this packet of minutes. Okay. If not, I move approval of the minutes of April 17th, May 15th, May 15th, the second meeting we had that night, May 29th, and June 5th. And 2 sets of minutes were revised this morning. So I move approval as revised.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Are there additions and corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. We'll go to reports from council members. I'll start on my left with Councilmember Sandberg. Do you have a report this evening?
Yes, I do. I have had the privilege of serving on the review committee for the 4th Street Garage. And in our last meeting, I'm pleased to report that all of the conditions that we had and the RDC had requested appear to have been met. This was run by a very proficient project manager in conducting all the elements to this, including the demolition of the existing garage, no more than 550 spaces, and currently the design on the table is at 504. 10 electric vehicle charging stations, solar panels, 50 bikes, spaces, 10 bike lockers, 25% of all space used by compact vehicles, dedicated carpool parking, maintenance and caretaking plan for the life of the garage, retail space on the ground floor, 2 public restrooms, designated area for transportation pickup, drop-off, Park Smart Sustainability certification, and we're going for the silver. And then, of course, public art and architecturally significant design elements, and all within a reasonable cost. This is not an easy process, but it was one that Chris Sturbaum and I got to sit in on and observe with the architects and the construction managers, and again, the project managers who did just a phenomenal job of working through all the details and solving all the problems. There's still a lot more to go. This is still at the design review phase, but it is moving along as planned, and barring no foreseen difficulties, this should be up and running fairly quickly, even though it will be a complete demolition and a rebuild. But I'm pleased to report this is going to go to the RDC on Monday for their approval and their strong look at the finances. But just pleased to report back to my colleagues and to the public that things are going quite well with the design. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for your service on that committee. Councilmember Sims, do you have a report?
No report this evening. I'm particularly looking forward to hearing from our students. Thank you.
So am I. Councilmember Volin, do you have a report?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I am pleased to see Councilmember Rallo's Resolution 1911 on the agenda tonight, in the same way that the YES Society, the Youth for Environmental Sustainability and Improvement, is trying to better the world. So is a group of students at the project school who have been working all year to research a solution to a problem in the city. And I'm looking forward to, they've prepared a presentation that they'll be giving during public comment. And they have handed out packets that each member should have in front of them on the dais that they can take a look at during their presentation. But I just want to say that between those 2 initiatives and the, I forget what it's called, there's some kind of initiative to have a youth council that I'm looking, I've lost track of what is happening with that, but I'm eager to the budgeting council, yeah. Where high school students and younger can take part. I'm looking forward to seeing that happen, to engaging fully the youth of the community in the governance of the city. So I'm very grateful for everyone who has come out tonight to support the Project Schools presentation, and I urge everyone to listen to it attentively because it's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ruff, do you have a report?
Well, yeah, I'd just like to say to people, because it's coming pretty fast, the construction north of Martinsville to Indianapolis of the Interstate 69 extension. Most people are quite familiar with dealing with the stretch between Bloomington and Martinsville for many, many years. This was a project that many in this community, many on this council, aggressively and actively opposed, did absolutely everything we could as a community and the leadership of the community, backed by a tremendous number of individuals and groups who worked alongside and supported community leadership in opposing this project. 25 years ago, the opposition to the project was articulating that opposition in terms of the insanity of building another super highway, car-oriented superhighway in the face of global climate change. This was being talked about at the time, 20 to 25 years ago. And many in the community continue to be cheerleaders for the project, including our local newspaper, the Herald Times. We shouldn't let it be forgotten, because the mistake, if we don't remember and recognize and continue to think about mistakes of the past, we will continue as a society to make similar mistakes in the future. So again, don't let it be forgotten that that was a multi-billion-dollar project. Many of those funds, which could have gone to maintaining, improving existing roads, and now if you've driven a lot around the state lately, but the condition of a lot of the roads is, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, it is directly related to the diversion of billions of dollars to construct this additional mileage that now also has to be maintained in addition to the already pre-existing mileage that was already maintained. And don't let people also tell you that it couldn't have been used for anything but constructing I-69, because that's a lie. The initial $750 million of that project came directly from Governor Daniels' sale of the Northern Indiana Toll Road. That money is a state asset being liquidated, basically. Could have gone to schools, education, could have gone to health, could have gone to anything, any priority the state would have wanted to put it towards. Instead, we put it towards an unneeded, I mean, people say, oh, it's great driving between Bloomington and Evansville now. Yeah, because there's hardly any traffic on it ever, because there was no demand then, and there will not be. And it's just a tragic waste in the face of changing global climate change and this battle to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. Be prepared for a very difficult time for the next several years between Indianapolis and Bloomington as the stretch from Martinsville to Indianapolis gets under construction, and all traffic has to be diverted up 67. There's really no other way to go. And so all the existing 67 traffic plus the additional 37 traffic is going to be going that way, because I don't think many people will go to Columbus and up 65. Anyway, don't let the lessons be forgotten. Make sure they get, if they've been learned at all, but make sure that you do what you can to make sure people do understand and do learn from that fiasco. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ruff. Councilmember Piedmont-Smith, do you have a report?
No report.
Okay, I don't have a report, but I'd like to read a disclosure of conflict of interest for Councilmember Granger this evening, who could not be here. She's in Louisville this evening at the Congress for New Urbanism with Councilmember Sturbaum and soon-to-be Councilmember Volin. That disclosure is, Councilmember Granger has requested that a disclosure of conflict of interest attached to our memo this evening be submitted for council acceptance this evening. She was a member of the 2019 Jack Hopkins Committee and also serves as Development Director for the Shalom Community Center, SEC, which would receive 2 grants with adoption of Resolution 1909 this evening. These grants would fund the following. Number 1, $12,502 to purchase water-efficient toilets, washers, and dryers, and a reach and freezer. And number 2, $8,498 as part of a collaborative application with Life Designs to purchase 50 fingerprint deadbolt locks. Please note that these grants would not result in a direct financial benefit to Councilmember Granger. During the committee deliberations, she announced the conflict and recused herself from the votes regarding these grants. As Councilmember Granger will not be in attendance tonight, there is no need for council to divide the question as indicated in the council packet. Assuming acceptance, this disclosure form will be filed at a state and local level and will immunize Councilmember Granger from certain liabilities. Mr. Sherman, is there anything to add?
Just a motion to accept the disclosure would be in order.
Move to accept disclosure of the conflict.
Second.
Okay, do we require a roll call vote or a simple voice affirmation?
Whatever is the will of the council.
I move for a voice vote.
Okay. I think I'll choose that. So all in favor of accepting this conflict of interest from Councilmember Granger, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is accepted.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes councilmember reports. We'll now go to mayor and city offices, and our first item is the Bloomington Arts Commission and Bloomington Entertainment and Arts District Annual Report. Mr. Crowley, who is presenting?
Andrew Fenton, Chair of the Bloomington Arts Commission.
Terrific, thank you.
And the Bloomington Entertainment and Arts District and Bloomington Arts Commission presentations are combined now.
You may
So
want to-
Sean Starwitz and I will be speaking back to back, and we'll take questions afterwards. I'd like to thank members of the community and the Common Council for allowing me the opportunity to speak on the activities of the Bloomington Arts Commission over this past year. The Bloomington Arts Commission was created in 1983, and our mission is to stimulate and encourage the arts and cultural activities in Bloomington with the vision of contributing to a thriving community where the arts are central to the quality of life. When full, the commission has 11 members, 5 appointed by Common Council and 6 by the mayor. And I'd like to ask, many of our members of the commission are here tonight, if they would rise. Thank you all for being here. Among our ranks include artists, arts administrators, art historians, art educators, and artist representatives. Above all of us are advocates for the city of Bloomington and the arts fostered here. In 2016 and 2017, the Commission developed a strategic plan intended to serve as a guide for our development through the year 2019. And there are 3 key priorities to this document: promoting and supporting community-wide cultural planning efforts, amplifying and supporting the development of sustainable programs, services, and processes that increase community engagement and provide growth to the arts and culture of our city. And finally, advocating for enhanced access, participation, and investment in the arts. All these are important and reflected in our organized work together. Now, the plan itself is largely driven by our defined civic values for art, which you see above, and some support the idea that all people should be encouraged to create and participate in the arts, that arts have a personal, civic, and economic worth, that private and public sectors are responsible for the fostering of arts, and that the arts can be an information and cultural exchange. And I should note here, too, when we speak about the arts, we're generally thinking about sculpture and murals as being public art, but we also recognize that music, theater, dance, film, and creative writing are important as well. Now, these civic values for the arts have been our guideposts for the Commission as we grow and continue to support the arts in this community. The list was actually developed from our Public Art Master Plan, which after many years of hard work was released in 2015. This Public Art Master Plan articulated not only the principles and the guidelines for those public art activities with which it has direct connection, but also to put forth a blueprint for the ideal environment of public art in the city, and a recognition that the arts really exist within a changing physical, sociological, political, and economic landscape. So, how have we done? And how have we fulfilled both our current strategic plan and the Public Art Master Plan over the last year? First is one of our most important jobs, and that's to oversee the city's Percentage for the Arts program. This ordinance was passed in 1994 and established a municipal arts fund from 1% allocations of city capital projects. This fund has supported many of Bloomington's iconic works of public art. And this year, the program has really flourished based on 2 major municipal projects, the Trades District just north of here and Switchyard Park. And I'm happy to know that we've selected finalists for both of these projects and intend to announce the commission artists in the very near future, although I'm sorry to say not this evening, but very soon. These artists were chosen based on their skills, as well as how their proposed works will contribute to the past and current history of the sites and the physical spaces in which they'll inhabit. We're confident that the Trades District and Switchyard Park represent just 2 of the many ways in which the Percent for Arts ordinance will continue to support the contributions to the art through municipal capital projects. And an important part of the Percent for Arts has really allowed us, as the arts commissioners, to engage more directly with the community, not only in terms of advocacy, but in terms of active involvement, investment. For example, over a period of 4 weeks this spring, we collected more than 350 public comments concerning the 5 Trades District finalists. We took these both at the farmers market, at various cities events, and digitally on the website hosted by the city. This increased dialogue around public art helped, we think, to build community trust in the process. And we plan to continue this type of structured public engagement as more and more projects develop. Now, with the time remaining, I'd like to go on to a few more of our key activities over this past year. One thing that we're most proud of over this last year was the commissioning of the Bloomington Bicentennial Community Song, Ride, by local resident Jeff Cannon. Mr. Cannon was chosen from over 20 responding applicants to a public call for proposals. With modest funds, Mr. Cannon, along with members of the Bloomington Arts Commission and many volunteers and local musicians, created a lasting and charming musical and lyrical testament to Bloomington's character. Significantly, the song was written with adaptability in mind. He has a marching band arrangement, a symphonic arrangement, a folk acoustic arrangement, as well as a rock arrangement. And he's also established a website where members of the community can download the song as well as the scores for their own use. And I hope you all saw him just moments ago present in the lobby of City Hall during our grants reception. Next, another new initiative taken on by the Bloomington Arts Commission this year was partnering with Ivy Tech Community College Bloomington and their annual Community Arts Awards. This event, held at the Waldron Fine Arts Center, publicly recognized individual contributions to Bloomington's arts community, and more significantly, perhaps, it also serves as an annual reminder of the community that art can help to build. And finally, I'd like to highlight the Grants for Arts program, which we just held a reception for a few moments ago. Considering the Bloomington Art Commission charge to promote and support the creation of art, this program directly fosters and bolsters local arts and arts organizations in Bloomington. Traditionally, the Arts Commission has awarded $20,000 annually in grants to local artists and organizations. This year, our city's Common Council increased their financial support for the program to $40,000. This truly significant increase in funding allowed the Arts Commission to expand our efforts in supporting the arts. And on behalf of the Arts Commission, we'd like to thank the Common Council now for their tremendous support for this program. Thank you. And the results of your investment. The expanded funding and parameters have led to some real growth in this last year. First, we saw a 33% increase in applications. And this year, we were able to award 16 organizations and artists granted with project and operating support. And I'd like those recipients who are still here at City Hall tonight to stand and be recognized as well. Of those 2019 grant recipients, 31% were new applicants to the program. And finally, 73% of organizations selected for funding received the amount requested for project support, which will help to ensure the complete success of their endeavors. And to conclude, this has been a year of tremendous growth for the arts in Bloomington. I'd like to thank the Common Council, as well as the Mayor's Office, for their continued and increased support. The Arts Commissioners deserve thanks for their dedication to volunteer public service. And more than anyone, we'd like to give thanks to the citizens of Bloomington who support the Arts Commission and the arts community, but who also challenge us to make meaningful and responsible decisions with public funding. As we wrap up this year, we look forward to developing a new guiding document and strategic plan that will allow us to build on the successes of the last several years, act on a couple of lessons learned, and continue to enhance the quality of life in the city through the arts. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah,
Mr. Starwood.
Sean Starwoods, Economic and Sustainable Development. I'm sorry that's taken me 3 years to present to you all, but we've been having a lot of work with the cultural district known as the BEAD that we're home to, so I'll just jump right in and then we can go into questions. So if you all have may noticed, we have a new look. I think if you just hit the space bar, yeah, or it should work. Nope. Always having technical difficulties. So it's actually inspired by the city logo, and our motto for the Bloomington and Entertainment and Arts District as we move forward is that there's possibilities in every direction. So the Bloomington Entertainment and Arts District was founded in 2008. We were one of the first cities in Indiana to establish that, just like our 1% program. We've always been a thought leader in the state and in the region. under the previous administration, Mayor Cruzan and Maya Michelson, who you all know very well. And as that logo kind of evolved, it's lived its life, and so we had to think about ways in which to kind of update ourselves and compete in the 21st century economy. And we really think that this branding identity that was helped created by Under Consideration, a national graphic design firm that moved to Bloomington, was awarded the contract late last year and was able to come up with this. And part of the challenge with the cultural district is that we have arts and culture groups that are not housed within the cultural district. So the idea of possibilities in every direction allows us for, if you want to go to the next slide, allows us to be more inclusive, allows them to own the identity of the bead, and ultimately help us with our mission statement, which is to bring together the business and the creative sectors to advance commerce and culture, build community, and spur sustainable economic development. And in 2018, we added to foster an excellent quality of place, which is a really thriving factor to my particular department, as well as the city as a whole. So in terms of how we've been doing since 2008, so total in Bloomington, we have 783 nonprofits. We're going strong. But within the cultural district and also within the arts and culture sector, in 2008 we had 51. In 2016 we have 78. So we are clearly making a significant investment to support nonprofits in our community. And once again, this is Cardinal Stage, which we've seen that growth and evolution since 2008. We've recently updated our cultural asset maps. We've inventoried over 190 cultural assets. And so you can kind of see the bead, which is that little red highlighted area, and the amount of assets that are not necessarily within the cultural district. So we're always trying to be, because as a city entity, it's hard not to, we can't alienate our own population. So we try to be inclusive as possible in terms of cultural assets. We received a grant from the Indiana Arts Commission last year through the Cultural District Program to create the first Bead Summit, which brought over 100 people into the council chambers for a whole day long workshop where we heard from other cultural districts across the state to see where we matched up, where we wanted to aspire to, but then also secretively we were working on the strategic plan. As in this community, we have a lot of plans. The comp plan was passed last year. We have the TDM coming up. There's a variety of things, and so we wanted to think about a more creative approach in which we could finalize a strategic plan, and we did that through the summit, through a series of activations, engagements, and questions. And ultimately, where we ended up is here for the 2019-2021 strategic plan, which goal number one is to promote and support district-wide cultural planning and identity efforts. The BEAD is committed to planning and implementing diverse policies and programs that enhance and promote equitable, culture-enriched community. Amplify and support the development of sustainable services, processes, and collaborations that increase community engagement and promote growth in the arts around the BEAD. And ultimately, goal number three is to coordinate and research advocacy initiatives about the BEAD, provide data and analysis to arts and cultural organizations, partners, patrons, constituents, and ultimately supporters. So we've started to do that. We have our first comprehensive maintenance plan underway right now. We've been taking inventory. I'm sure you all have seen some of the issues we've had with graffiti or vandalism to the Evan Farrell Memorial. We're actually relocating this sculpture further down the beeline to protect it and ensure its longevity. So on the left here is the damaged piece, and we just got it out of the fabricator shop to be repaired. And also in terms of infrastructure and maintenance, some ongoing research and data we've been doing. We just completed a BEAD salary study, and that is a way to make sure that our cultural nonprofits are being transparent and being competitive in the workforce. We are also working with Joanna Ronkowitz out of the SPIA program on a space needs assessment as we think about growth within the cultural district. It's really important to make sure that we're leveraging the spaces we do have and also thinking about the spaces we don't have. So it's a dual fold kind of space needs assessment in terms of arts and culture initiatives. And then also as well, ongoing things like ensuring equity, inclusion, and accessibility to the arts and cultural programming in our community, making sure things ADA are accessible, a variety of those kinds of initiatives. And I'm also happy to announce that through our department and ESD, we've been able to create an arts capital investment program specifically for artists through our 1% program, which has been an economic barrier for artists who have never done public art before. And we'll have more as that program rolls out. We also were able to create a Connect microgrant program, and this is to encourage and foster more community engagement in our community. This also came from an IAC grant from the state, so we're very lucky to be 3 for 3 on grants out of the state, which is at 100% right now. And so they're microgrants, so they're $1,000 grants that encourage community engagement. In 2018, we awarded Lotus Education and Arts Foundation for their open house event to make sure that the fire bay is being used, or the firehouse, I'm sorry, is being used properly, and ensuring that the community has buy-in in that programming. And then also the Chamber of Commerce is researching an arts passport type model, which will be really beneficial to the community. And we will continue that program in 2019. We also advocate on state legislation, which is really a tremendous opportunity for Bloomington to be a thought leader on. This year, Senate Bill 255 was introduced, which would create a tax area for the cultural districts in the state. There's only 10. We are one of 10. And the way that bill would work is it would capture future state sales tax and payroll tax. So it's not an additional tax on the community. It's future revenues that have not been generated in the state, and it ultimately kick it back to us to invest in the arts and culture. And apart from the small budget that the state allots for the Indiana Arts Commission, this would be the only other funding mechanism in the state for arts and culture. So it's a really tremendous opportunity. Unfortunately, it died on the House floor, but I've been told that third time's a charm. So we'll be going back, and we were fortunate to be one of the communities that offered testimony and to kind of showcase the stories and businesses like Secretly Canadian and their growth here, as well as Rainbow Bakery, the IFEL Group, and a variety of other kind of arts and culture assets that make for good talking points during legislative sessions. We also are expanding programming. This is an exciting opportunity for us to work cross-departmentally, similar to what we did with the street fair. So we've been working with the Community and Family Resources Department, the Latino Affairs Commission, and the Black History Month Commission on the Blackie Brown Arts Festival, which expanded this year to 3 days. We saw over 1,000 people over 3 events. And that really kind of strikes true to our equity and inclusion priorities that came through the strategic plan. And I believe that's all I have, and we can, sorry to rush through it, but I know we're limited on time, and we got these amazing yes folks that are gonna talk about their resolution, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Starowitz. You did very well, and I appreciate the brevity. So we'll go to questions from council. Councilmember Folin.
I don't have a question, just a correction. The council does not have the authority to raise funds. It can only cut them. While we approve the budget, we owe thanks to Mayor Hamilton and his administration for allotting the extra dollars that the Arts Commission was able to give out. So I just wanted to make sure that credit went where it was due. We aren't solely responsible. We were responsible for approving the budget that was presented by the administration. So you should have them to thank as well. That's all. Thank you.
I lobbied for it.
And Councilmember Sandberg definitely lobbied for it. So give her some credit too.
Who's our council liaison? Thank you.
Further questions? May I ask one about when you were talking about space needs, that includes display space for artists in the community, is that correct?
That would be included. It's not necessarily about solely focused on visual art. And that's the challenge with a space needs assessment, is the diversity of arts and cultural offerings that we have in our community is pretty cumbersome. So the way that we're thinking about it is thinking about what spaces are being either underutilized or not used at all, or how there could be, even in the city's resources, how the Banneker, which was the heartbeat of Blackie Brown this year, how do we leverage that for more arts and cultural support? And then also, too, thinking about creative strategies for vacant storefronts to a variety of other kind of cross. We've already started to see, and I can't take credit for this, in the arts community resource sharing. So, like, for example, Cardinal Stage and BPP are sharing technical directors. Like, that kind of ability to kind of share resources and share availability among the groups is really important to make sure that we're getting kind of high quality experiences, but also supporting each other. Because it's arts and culture, it's competitive, but it's not competitive like business is competitive.
Right, yeah, it's complementary. Other questions? Okay, thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
great.
report, and thank you to
Yeah, thank you all.
the Wilmington Arts Commission members. Terrific. Now we'll move on to the Innovation Director report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dave DeKidd, and I'm the current Director of Innovation for the City of Bloomington. And I'm so excited that we've got a full chamber to hear about the wonderful work that has been done in innovation. Before we get into the presentation itself, I want to let you know that this is a bit on the long side. The last time that innovation presented to the council was June of 2017, so I've got 2 years worth of information to supply to you. I'll try and keep it very high level, but if you feel like I have glossed over something that's really important to you or your constituents, please reach out to me. I geek out on this, and I love talking about innovation. I'd love to have one-on-ones or a working session if you're open to that. Before we get into the project itself, there are 2 things that I want to give you a little bit of background on. One is me, and one is the national context of the role of Director of Innovation. The takeaway from this is a graphic representation of my resume. There's just a variety of areas and fields that I've been involved in, and you can see a lot of technology in there. I have a master's in positive organization development and change from Case Western in Cleveland. You'll see the influence of process improvement and technology in the future plans before joining the city government in January of this year full-time. So nationally, a decade ago, this role of Chief Innovation Officer or Director of Innovation, it didn't exist. Today, there are more than 70. And if you look at the data on the right, you'll see that more and more cities are offering this role. They are staffing this role as the role matures. And they're also ensuring that this role, the staff that supports this role, have the skill sets of design thinking, data analytics, and even storytelling. I love this quote from James Anderson. I actually applied for this role the first time around, and Tom Miller beat me out. But one of the criticisms that I read way back in the day was, why do we need a Director of Innovation? Shouldn't we expect that our staff be innovators? And I absolutely agree. We should absolutely expect that our staff be innovators. And we should absolutely supply them with the training, the coaching, the direction that they need in order to be successful. In organizations like ours, innovation doesn't start with a Director of Innovation. It's already happening. It's been happening in the city of Bloomington since the city of Bloomington was born. What is also happening is that we have some really bright, creative people with very big ideas, and our innovation is dependent on them. And the next stage of innovation is to create a culture of innovation where everyone has the tools, the methodology, the framework, and the vocabulary to spread it. So a bit of context. When Mayor Hamilton was elected in early 2016, he established the Innovation Task Force. One of the recommendations of the task force was the establishment of this role. Tom Miller filled this role until 2018, and I came on board in 2019. The task force had a number of different recommendations. The top 11 are listed here. 10 of the top 11 were implemented. 3 of those are still in progress. There's one, the creation of a universal community calendar, which was not pursued, and I can go into details of that at a later date. Also, I'd like to bring to the attention of the council that yesterday a memo was distributed with a lot of details about each of the aspects of the topics that I'm covering here. So again, if you're finding that there's just not enough detail there, I'd love to talk with you about it. From a budgetary perspective, in 2017 and 2018, in addition to the salary for the director position, $100,000 was allotted to an innovation fund so that we can seed innovation projects internally and also in partnership with the community. And you'll see expenditures in 2017 and 2018 didn't even approach that 100K. So in evaluating the budget for 2019, we brought that down to 50K. All of the details of the exact expenditures are included in that memo. Now we're getting into some of the projects, and I'm following up on the presentation that Tom Miller gave in 2017. One of the efforts was automatic meeting transcription, hopefully to displace the amount of time that it takes to create meeting minutes. A lot of different technologies were explored. None of them really fit what we needed, and at the same time, the sophistication of YouTube and their technology increased to the point where when you upload a video to YouTube, it automatically transcribes, and you can search through that, click on the keyword, and go to the exact timestamp. We've changed the wording of our contract with CATS so that, and we're working on the process about this with them, so that not only are they uploading the video to their database, but they're also going to be uploading it to YouTube as well. The program Fast Forward Bloomington provides an avenue for the residents of our city to get up close and personal with some technology that will be a part of their lives. In 2017, we brought an autonomous bus. In 2018, there was a virtual reality panel at the library, and in 2019 we will have a celebration of drones called Drone Palooza. It's September the 7th at North High School from 1 to 6 p.m., so save the date. Unfortunately, many of the processes throughout the city still rely on paper. One of the processes that we were able to transform are the fire inspections. So HAND and the fire department have been supplied with iPads that they use in the field. Not only can we create these reports in the field, but we can also query the data that comes out of them to look for trends on where to deploy our resources more efficiently. Transmap is a project that our Public Works would love to present to you separately. There's just so much great stuff about Transmap. The vehicle on the right is outfitted with a bunch of different cameras and sensors, and it created a map of our roads, our sidewalks, and our street signs that you can see on the left. And it allows a comprehensive picture so that they can do better planning and they can have better coordination with the projects that are planned by public utilities. 2 drones were purchased through the Innovation Fund, one small one and one large one. They were largely proof of concept. We're now creating the guidelines at the city for how those drones can and cannot be used. Those guidelines will be distributed to a number of the departmental boards and will be available for the public to view and provide input on at Drone Palooza. One of the partnerships that we really cherish are with our coding community. Code for America is the umbrella organization, and we have a local brigade called BMG Hack. In 2017, they created a prototype app for mobile bus passes. In 2018, they reviewed both the user interface and the functionality of our U-Report. And in 2019, they're working with our volunteer network to create some technology that will help connect those people who have services or things with the people who want those services or things, and do that without the manual input of the volunteer network coordinator. In order to better connect our residents with the information about the services that we want, one of the technologies that was explored was a chatbot, so that when a visitor to our website comes to a page, then a text box pops up and a series of funneling questions are presented, so that at the end of all of that, they're presented with the information that they're looking for and the contact information, and they're on their way. What we found through research is that people aren't actually searching in our website, they're actually searching through Google and coming to the page that they actually want. So we didn't pursue this one any further. However, The technology that's underneath it is called TextIt, and it is used by Bloomington Roadwork to push networks out through that Twitter account about roadwork changes and forecasts. Facebook Live is something that we invested in heavily in 2017, and we now use a lot, again, as another way to bring residents into not only decisions, but discussions about really big topics like affordable housing, the energy and waste task force, and so forth. Trello Project Management is a collaborative and free project management tool that we've begun to use in our departmental budgeting process. It allows for visibility into all of the projects and also gives some visual management as to whether we are on target for those budget goals or not. Whew. So that's all of the projects that have been accomplished from 2016 to 2018. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time to tell you about where we're going in 2019 and our 3 focus areas. The first is increasing organizational effectiveness. By identifying the business process flows and using the lean framework and methodology, we can look at, from multiple perspectives, multiple departmental perspectives, what is actually going on, where are the barriers, and then through that process, understand where the opportunities are. As part of that, we need data to support this. And the best way to understand the data is to make it visual. So there's a heavy emphasis on data visualization and choosing the right tools for that. We've got a lot of data sets in Be Clear. We're beyond 181 data sets at this point, and we can do a better job of making those data sets more understandable through data visualization, both by the public and internally in our operations. The second area of focus is nurturing a culture of innovation. And as I mentioned before, innovation has already been happening. We do need to know where it's happening and who is involved in it, because those are our champions. And we want to leverage them as coaches throughout the organization. So we're at the point where we're capturing successes. So we have interns that are crawling through the organization and capturing these stories. So this is an instance where storytelling is really helpful. The image on the right shows an innovation at the fire department. This is a gear drying rack. And these are available commercially. However, they were too large for our fire bay, and they were not on wheels, so they had to be stationary. The firemen said, and firewomen said, we can build this. We're handy people. And so this is all PVC pipe that has holes drilled in it, and there are 2 blowers on either end. When they come back from a fire, their gear is really sweaty and wet from the hoses. They hang it up on here, turn on the blowers, and it dries out, so they're not putting on a clammy suit or stinky suit the next time they go out. They're actually on version 2 of this because they incorporated a feedback loop to collect information about what's working and what's not, and that's how innovation is showing up. Design thinking is part of nurturing a culture of innovation. I talked about supplying the organization with a framework, a methodology, a vocabulary. Design thinking really disrupts the way that we are able to look at business processes. Many of the employees and the staff at the city have been working here for a number of years, and it's very difficult to take a fresh pair of eyes to something that you've been doing for a number of years. Design thinking helps us do that. Preparing the organization for the future, we're aligning with 2 organizations that have emerged as thought leaders in helping cities become more innovative and use best practices. One is Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the other is MetroLab Network. Bloomberg Philanthropies has an evaluation of 45 different dimensions where we self-evaluate, and when we submit, we get information back from Bloomberg on how well are you doing according to best practices, what you could be doing to get closer to it, and where they recommend that you start to have the biggest splash effect. We don't have to be certified to get the benefit of aligning with them, but through the certification process, we get free access to conferences, to webinars, to free on-site training and coaching. So it's a huge benefit to align with them and be part of their network. The other is MetroLab Network, and their goal is to help cities establish formal relationships with their local universities to treat the cities as living laboratories and leverage the brain trust of the university, especially in research, for those really big, thorny issues that we encounter. The department-led initiatives that I want to bring your attention to, many of which you are already aware because they've presented or will be presenting, Advanced Metering Initiative. This is the smart meters, smart water meters, that's being led by Public Utilities. The Youth Participatory Budgeting Pilot, they're doing a fantastic job. This is being led by CFRD, our Director of Safe and Civil Cities. I can't wait to hear their presentation to you all. I think it's going to happen in August, and they're just really hitting it out of the park on this one. And the Energy and Waste Task Force, which is a cross-departmental, partnership. Some of the initiatives that I'm directly involved in include data analysis and visualization, which we talked about, HR process optimization. Right now, we've got a big bottleneck when we onboard about 350 part-time seasonal Parks and Rec workers every spring. So we're working with Parks and Rec, IT, and HR to take an interdepartmental look at that process, and we're also looking regionally to see what other Parks and Recs are doing about this. The Internet of Things, with the smart water meters, we have an opportunity because the smart water meters are building a communications network that we could add other sensors to communicate with. Some of the things that we heard from residents and the department heads are parking sensors to help residents find parking quicker to reduce our carbon footprint and also reduce frustration, not being able to find a parking place. Trail or park counting, so we understand really granularly how our parks are being used so we can direct resources to the ones that need it as opposed to a regular maintenance schedule. And smart lighting, where we can automatically brighten or dim according to the need. The last is our favorite, drones. Unpiloted aerial vehicles, or UAVs. As I mentioned, we're developing those guidelines, and we have an event to introduce the public to what is possible with drones. So in closing, I just want to thank the council for allowing us to present on all the great work over the past couple of years and the direction that we're going, and I want to encourage connection. And I'm open for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms. Kidd. Questions from council? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Ms. Kidd.
Thank you.
You mentioned MetroLab and our relationship with them. Have we, through that, established a relationship or a partnership with the university or Ivy Tech in order to, as you say, study community issues? Has
Right.
that happened yet?
We're currently, I'm talking with MetroLab about their process and also with South Bend because they're a member of the MetroLab network. One of the requirements of being a member of the network is that you have a formal memorandum of understanding between the mayor and either the president or the provost or the VP of research of the university. I don't know if it would include community colleges, but I will definitely ask them as I'm exploring that.
But have we established anything with IU, for an example, yet? Or is this part of the future plan?
It's part of the future plan. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
report and welcome. Welcome to the city team. We'll now go to the introduction of transportation management consultant. Mr. Robinson, welcome.
Scott, do you have a presentation? There's a PowerPoint on the desktop. On the desktop. This one? Good evening. My name is Scott Robinson. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning and Transportation. I thank you for giving us opportunity to give you a report tonight about the kickoff for our travel demand management plan. Back in February, the city issued a request for qualifications That's a process that we do to solicit qualifications from consultants around the country interested in working with the city to solve some problems that we're working with. This is identifying a process to help us manage our transportation system. We had 7 consultants from around the country that responded to our request. I was very impressed with both the quality and high caliber of the firms. I'm proud to announce that we do have somebody under contract tonight. I want to introduce to you Justin Shore with Wells and Associates. He will give a brief presentation on what travel demand or transportation demand management is, about the process of what we're going to embark on over the next 6 months, give you an opportunity to ask us some questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. He'll give you a brief introduction about their firm and what they do, some observations that he's seen here in Bloomington and things that we are working on. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you all for having us here tonight. Scott mentioned I would tell you a little bit about what transportation demand management is. And I like to tell the story about how, I guess about 25 years ago, I had my first job out of college. I came home to my roommate, who is now a pediatrician, runs his own practice, and I said, hey, I got this job doing transportation demand management. And he kind of tilted his head and he said, is that like supply and demand? And I said, yeah, actually it kind of is, because in the world of transportation, there's really 2 ways to impact traffic congestion and or parking supply issues, and that's supply side, which is building more supply, building more roadway, or managing the demand and how people use that. And that's what I do for my company, and it's what we're here to talk about with you today. So a little bit about my team. Wells & Associates is a transportation consulting firm. We do work all over the country. We focus on both supply and demand side solutions. So we really try to look at it through a balanced lens and understand what the best approach is, because sometimes it's a little bit of both. The team at Wells that is focused on this project is, and from the transportation demand management or TDM perspective, is myself. I bring the perspective of the planning side of things. I've been doing TDM for 25 plus years. I've been in the trenches, but my background is more in urban planning and city planning. My colleague Courtney, who will be involved in the project later on, is more of the marketing side of things, and very much in the trenches implementing these kinds of programs across the country. And my colleague Brian, last but not least, is an engineer. I bring that up to you because it's the balance of disciplines that we bring to this that I think will be most helpful. The last bullet on this slide you'll see talks about how we make recommendations based on what we know works in the field. We're not just a planning firm. We're what we call practitioners, and we work in environments where if our clients don't meet their goals to reduce traffic or reduce parking demand, they can face multi-million-dollar fines. So we've had to figure out over the years how to really narrow down our approach and identify what it takes to change behavior, because there's money at stake. And it's with that in mind that that's the approach we're going, that sense of urgency is what we bring to our plans, because we want to make sure they work based on what we know works in the field. We've done that kind of work in the private sector, large universities, transportation management associations, which are nonprofits that do TDM, as well as government agencies. And we feel like all of that is what's required for the city of Bloomington. All of these entities are part of your community and is what is needed to make a successful TDM program. Our approach is one that we like to say is more, it's an ongoing approach. We start with really trying to make sure that our plans are based on what the community needs. And you'll see we have 4 phases here. We go from planning and developing strategies to actually creating those strategies and outlining what they are. But what we've found over the years is that you can create strategies, but if people aren't aware of them and aren't engaged in using them, there's no value. And that's kind of, just you always hear the metaphor of having a plan that sits on a shelf. It's important that people are engaged in that plan. And last but not least, what we find is that if you're not measuring the performance of your TDM program, you don't really know if you've made progress. And one of the things we want you to be able to know is, are you, you put this plan in place, you took some action on it, are you making progress towards your goals? Otherwise, why are you doing it? You're spending a lot of money on and not really measuring your performance. But that's not where it ends, and you'll see in this graph, this is the approach that we will take with you. The measurement is just an opportunity for you to reevaluate where you are with your TDM program and then tweak it. This is not, there's never an end point with your TDM program. If you asked me 2 years ago, would I think scooters would be such a big thing in transportation, I wouldn't have known about it. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have known about bike share. I could go on and on. And as technology evolves, the transportation solutions that are out there are constantly evolving, and you have to be evolving your TDM program to go along with that, but then feeding it into new strategies and going through the process to engage and measure again. Our goal with this plan is to leave you with that process in place so that after we're gone, you can be constantly evaluating and tweaking and modifying your plan so that it's yours to own and carry on into the future. Critical to our approach is really making sure we have our stakeholders engaged. There are a number of them that we've already started having conversations with, but there's two key elements for us. One is, you may have heard of a SWOT analysis. We use something called a SOAR analysis. It's strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. What we like about it is two things. It does, as opposed to a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which focuses on negative things, this is focused on what we do well, what we could do to enhance what we do well, and then what do we want to be? Where do we want to be in 10 years? That's the aspirations. And last but not least is the results. How do we measure that we've achieved that aspiration? And why that's important, that result from our perspective is the most important thing, because depending on how you measure success, different types of TDM programs could be more important. So for example, we talked about this earlier, if you decide you want to have a zero carbon footprint as your metric for success, I might recommend that your garages all have electric charging stations, which would be an absolute legitimate way to reduce your carbon footprint. Would it reduce demand on parking? No. Would it reduce traffic? No. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying depending on what you're measuring success, the strategies you use to get there would be completely different. So that's why we start with that, and that's something we'll be doing very early in the project. That's high-level stakeholder engagement, key decision makers, but that's not where it ends, because ultimately it's people's travel behavior, it's individual people who are traveling that need to use the services and the strategies that we recommend. If they don't use them, again, it's just a plan that sits on a shelf. So the survey that we'll be doing is really to work with the end users to understand what would they use and what would it take to motivate them to change their behavior, to not drive as much, or to use another transportation choice. We've done this approach in a number of examples throughout the country. Outside of Washington, D.C. is an edge city called Tysons. Again, not just writing a plan, but actually implementing it. So we know what works when we're writing these plans. The same thing with Buffalo, Niagara. And finally, Triangle Region is the Raleigh-Durham area. In each of these cases, especially the latter two, a lot of the dynamics are very similar to Bloomington. There's a considerable amount of higher education influencing that community. There's biotech. There's all the things that make this community tick as well. Maybe some smaller, some larger, but a lot of the same dynamics. In each of those cases, what we've learned is that it's really important to have buy-in. If, again, we write a plan and no one owns it to take it over the finish line, it's just going to sit on the shelf. So one of the things we're going to make sure we do is have this stakeholder group buy into it, but ensure that there is somebody to take ownership. Who is the champion that's going to make sure this plan is activated and taken over the finish line? And that's not really enough even there, because if the plan has all these great ideas, but there's not the funding to make it happen, it again sits on a shelf. So one of the most important two things we're going to do is make sure there is somebody to take the charge to make this plan happen, and make sure there are clear ideas on where to secure funds to bring it to life. We understand that as much as, as a consultant, we're often perceived as the carpetbagger, right? We're the people from out of town, what do we know about the local environment? And so as much as I'm talking about these other communities where we know we have lessons learned that we can bring to Bloomington, we also understand that Bloomington has its own unique qualities. And so, some of the things we've already understood just by driving around today, we did a lot of touring of the entire city, is, understanding, obviously, the university is a significant player. The other communities I mentioned had universities, but it's not as dominant a player and, don't have as much of a town-gown dynamic. But, having a younger average age of your population gives you opportunity to get people to change their behavior. Having a higher education level, significant healthcare industry, all these things play into how we will strategize helping with your TDM plan. We also had a chance to take a closer look at the transit system, understand the depth and the reach that it has, the level of service that it provides, the multi-use trail system. All these things are unique to Bloomington that other communities don't have, and how to best leverage those assets that are available. If you're going to ask people not to drive, there has to be something else for them to use, and these are the assets some of the assets we'd be looking at. We also wanted to make sure we understood, look, there's a lot of great foundational work that has been done recently and is being done or about to be completed that we want to build on. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make sure that our plan synchronizes, synergizes with the efforts that have already happened. So, the comprehensive plan is one of those elements. The multimodal transportation plan is, almost done as well. The sustainability action plan has a very clear goal in it about single occupancy vehicle mode split and reducing it, making sure that whatever we do synchronizes with that as well. And then finally, with parking ordinances, that managing parking on municipal parking facilities is another key element and something that has to be integrated with the TDM program. How people decide to arrive is driven by their decision on whether or not they need to park and where to park, or whether or not there are other choices for them to pick from. So again, this is really just to highlight some of the things that we've observed just driving around today. There's a lot of good stuff happening in Bloomington right now, and we're going to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and building on that. That said, there are also things that we need to overcome, and we're in the process of learning what those are and making sure that whatever barriers there are, we come up with strategies to help you overcome them. One of the sort of some closing thoughts, I think, that we've found with our plans that I would say is going to be a key part of this one as well, is that it's really important to be flexible and not too prescriptive. I mentioned earlier, technology is constantly changing. I've worked in a jurisdiction where they had a regulation for new development that they needed to put in certain TDM strategies, and they regulated that a particular development needed to have high-speed Wi-Fi or high-speed internet in every unit of the apartment building. That was 10 years ago. I now have high-speed internet on my phone. I don't need it in my unit. So you can see where now the developer is saying, well, what do I do? How do I integrate that into my property? That's just an example to say, if we get too prescriptive and not focused on the metric for success, we bind ourselves and actually, in the spirit of innovation, constrain ourselves from being innovative in terms of how we solve the problem. So again, focusing on the metrics for success instead of tactics will be a key part of this. Not to say that there won't be larger strategies, but not to bind us to them either. And creating a toolbox. I mean, that toolbox, just like mine at home, I'm constantly filling it and changing it with new tools, is something that we want to arm your staff and other key stakeholders with to implement these TDM strategies over the long term. So over the next 6+ months, we'll be working through that wheel I showed you in the beginning, all the steps that we'll walk through, from the creation to the engagement to the monitoring and the planning part, and we'll be wrapping up in January of 2020. So with that, I guess we open up the floor to any questions that y'all have.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. I appreciate your presentation. Are there questions from council? Councilmember Vaughan.
I was going to ask to have, we could have your slideshow and the other slideshows presented tonight sent via email to council staff so that we can pour over some of the details of the slides, that'd be appreciated. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you. Glad you're here. Excellent presentation. And let's get CDM down. Thank you.
Excited to work with you. Thank you.
If there are other questions, I had a question regarding, perhaps for Mr. Robinson, regarding the stakeholder group. What is the composition of the stakeholder group? And I understand it's already begun, correct? Have you been meeting with?
We've met with internal staff, and we're in the process of identifying some of the external stakeholders. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here.
So
So
are you in
the
the process?
stakeholders haven't been defined yet, so typically with most consultant projects, the kickoff is usually an internal with other staff, and the consultants are asking for data and who we want to include. But part of the SOAR process and survey, we're going to reach out to Indiana University, the Chamber, Cook, and other employers in and around this community so that we identify the right people that are involved to give us some direction on both that SOAR analysis and the survey so that we can target that. We met today with Bloomington Transit, some internal city departments. We've reached out to Indiana University and other folks that have been involved in both reviewing the RFQ responses and interviewing. So we've tried to include as many people as possible in this. And moving forward, we don't have any preset list of stakeholders. That's to be determined as we move forward, and as many as we can bring to the table. That's our goal.
Mr. Shore, when you work with stakeholder groups, we have a very diverse community. And so a lot of people who are challenged in terms of transportation are people of low income, people who are marginalized in the community. Is that going to be part of the stakeholder group as well? Reaching out to people who have challenges in terms of mobility in this community and that sort of thing? Or Mr. Robinson?
Yeah.
Is that part of
I think in
our goal?
general, our intent would be through the survey instrument to reach, employees of all kinds throughout the city. And I think it's, and I would imagine even with the Chamber of Commerce, they would have some suggestions on how to best reach that audience. But absolutely, I think the intent would be to have a system and a TDM plan that addresses every group within the city. And that's part of the toolbox that I mentioned earlier. It's not, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's not prejudiced toward any particular group.
Okay, so it's all inclusive. That's what you're aiming for?
Yes,
Terrific. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation. Look forward to working with you. I'll continue. All right, well, that concludes reports from the mayor and city offices. Council committee reports, do we have any?
No.
Don't think so. We'll now go to public comment, and we've reserved 20 minutes. Show of hands?
How many people who are not with the project school here to make public comment?
On items not on our agenda?
On items that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody here? We have one.
Okay,
Okay. Well, we have enough time for 20 minutes, so
terrific.
let's start with the project school.
Yes, if the project school would like to step up and introduce yourselves and make your presentation. I understand you may have a video. Thank you for coming.
Hi, my name is Karen McQueen, and my classmates and I are from the 6th and 7th grade class at the Bloomington Project School. Today was our last day of school, and we wanted to hit it, and we wanted to end it with a bang with you.
Good evening. My name is Kira DeFelice. Thank you for allowing us to share with you today. We are hopeful that you will help us to make our class's huge dream come true. We are also hopeful that we might be able to help you make that happen. We're going to talk to you about our playground project, which is our hope for a more accessible and universally designed playground at the Waldron Hill and Buskirk Park.
Hi, my name is Emma Wild. We have a packet of materials for each of you, which includes what we're showing today, spreadsheets with research we have done, a link to a video we will show you, and letters from several members of our class and photographs. If you would like more thoughts and ideas of what could be included in the planning of our new playground, we would be happy to share them with you.
Hello, my name is Maddie Waters. Our playground project began in the fall of 2018 when, with other work around disabilities awareness, our class watched news stories and read articles about the borders, boundaries, and limits people with disabilities often encounter with amusement parks and playgrounds, and about how people who cared made a difference. We began to consider the playground and park that we use for recess each and every day and saw that it is in many ways inaccessible. One student in our class, who uses a wheelchair, shared that she takes a book to recess every day because there isn't anything at the park that's accessible to her. That statement hit our class very hard, and we immediately began to dream about tackling the problem. Using poetic license, we developed a catchphrase, "Unaccessible is unacceptable." I'm Ruth. Okay, yeah. I'm Ruth. We learned from Parks and Rec and from Bloomington Utilities in the fall of 2018 that work will be done on a stormwater project, which will necessitate the removal of the current playground at Waldron Hill and Buskirk Park. It is our hope, as a new playground is planned and purchased, that serious consideration will be given to making the new playground accessible to all and universally designed so that all residents and visitors to Bloomington can experience a playground that is both fun and equitable for all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Bartlett. Our class held a Disabilities Awareness Fair this past winter where we partnered with local agencies and a disability advocacy program. We organized and provided information tables, awareness-building games, and a schedule of speakers of students with disabilities who shared about their disabilities and their lives. This fair helped to raise awareness of our desire to improve the playground, and we began to get the word out. Partnering with the IU Media School, a mini documentary was made about our work. Joining with the Council for Community Accessibility, our class helped to celebrate local businesses which have been deemed accessible.
Hi, my name is Nick Waters. Our class met with different representatives from around the city in order to gain more understanding of the workings of local government and agencies. In this process, we met with Mr. Stephen Volan, our local representative. He encouraged us to make a presentation to the whole council.
Hello, my name is Marcella Welzig-Medina, and we hope that a future playground would be more inclusive and might be able to include options such as musical instruments, sensory needs, and wheelchair-accessible areas. We would love to see the new playground be a place where all people can have fun next to each other.
Hi, I'm Juliana Samarata. This has been a big dream and a big project, but as one student said when we were told this would not be easy, I don't think it's not easy, but I don't think that is what we're going for. We're going for what is right. Thank you for your time this evening. We realize that a presentation to the council is fairly limited in what we can share in a timely fashion. If you would like to follow up or ask questions, please feel free to reach out to our teacher, Cindy Stark. Her contact information is in your packet.
Hi, my name is Lily Lauderman. Next, we have a video to show you. We hope that it will help you believe that unaccessible is unacceptable.
And started dreaming big, and I remember one of them even said, this is not going to be easy, but we're not looking for the easy thing, we're looking for the right thing. Teachers tend to be with groups of kids for 2 years. My group is a little bit different, so about a third of them I've had for 4 years, and I've lived with them, but several are new to the project school and to me this year as well, so it's kind of a mix this year.
It's a very welcoming school. We do lots of projects. It's a project-based learning. Schools really care a lot about how we grow as their you learn and learn.
My favorite thing about school is working on the playground project. The idea came from one of our friends, Jocelyn, who's in a wheelchair in our class. I asked the teacher if I could bring a book out to the playground because I couldn't get on it. I told her why, and then one day we got it to class, and that was really surprising. That just was horrifying, and our whole class was like, we don't want that to happen, so then we were like, we should make the park accessible.
first moment when they recognized that their peer could not access the playground, the room became dead silent. You could almost see their brains working and their ideas churning.
We just like decided that we were just like, oh my gosh, that's a big plan. We should start planning and raising money, and we have this idea and we can work up to it.
The project has kind of taken over across subjects. So in Reader's Workshop, they're learning how to dissect nonfiction text. So right now they're reading the articles about accessible playgrounds, and we're focusing on what stands to approach it as a reader, but it ties to the project.
Mostly we're working together on everything, but sometimes we'll split into little committees and groups to do the disability awareness fair to raise awareness. We thought that would be the first step. And I helped on the playground project group.
Basically a fair where we are trying to spread awareness of different types of disabilities all across the school.
We had games, interactive games where people could find out whether something was inaccessible or accessible.
I was helping out with the slides, with lots of information about different types of disabilities. So maybe not the ones you can just see from the outside.
People were kind of surprised at how many things were inaccessible.
I think the heart of the kids really is that they want life to be fair.
During the counseling, people spoke up, or people with disabilities, making women more aware of their accessibility and accessibility places. That would be a big help and push to actually making the world more accessible.
It's not just these school kids who use the park, but it's a whole community. It's a downtown public park, so it would benefit everybody. The kids want to do things. They want to be part of this. They want skin in the game. They want to raise money. So they have some big dreams about what they want to do.
There are so many people with disabilities and so much like they can't do if things aren't accessible. And so I guess we're just really passionate about that.
Inaccessible is unacceptable.
Yeah, they like me. Unaccessible.
Unaccessible.
Unaccessible. Unaccessible.
Unaccessible.
Thank you so much for your time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. I think we'll have a few questions. Would you introduce yourself? What's your name?
My name is Marcella Welzik Medina.
Well, this was an excellent presentation and a very important topic. So we'll go to council for questions. Councilmember Volin has a question.
First, I want to say thank you for bringing your presentation in on time, and it was very well done. Thank you very much for it. I'm also glad to see the spreadsheets that you've included in the packet. You've clearly done a great deal of research. One question I had was about, it seems like one of the ideas that your class has is to introduce musical instruments to the playground. Was there any concern about people outside the playground who might be distracted by the noise, especially if somebody comes, say, late at night and decides to play the glockenspiel or something? What does the class say to that concern, if any?
I think there's a comment from...
Is there someone who has we have an expert in the audience here who knows about this.
I think...
State your name again, please.
Maddie Waters.
Yeah.
So I think we wouldn't get anything that's too loud so that we wouldn't disrupt people. And I also think that as kids in a playground make noise, I don't know if that disrupts people as much. So if we make something that's no louder than the sound of like a yelling child, then people won't be that disrupted.
An excellent answer.
My name is Stephen Bartlett. I have another thing to add. We also had a committee working on a cocoon, which is a place that's very secluded where kids can go if it's too loud and just relax. So, yeah.
Well, very thoughtful. The only other thing I want to say is that the Parks and Recreation Department responded to an inquiry from Council Attorney Dan Sherman, who said that all the city's playgrounds now have some accessible features. Switchyard Park, when it opens, will be 100% accessible. What they're calling it is boundless. He also said that the department would welcome discussions regarding more accessible features at Waldron Hill and Buskirk Park, especially because, as you know, the utilities project is going to go through and dig up the whole park, and it's going to need to be replaced anyway. So you've already done a lot of work towards that. I can't wait to sit in on the discussion between your class and the Parks Department. So thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Sandberg has a question.
I would like to echo what a great job you've all done. Very thoughtful, dealing with problems that are very, very real for a good number of our residents. And my next question has to do with, are you willing to take on the issue of scooters and accessibility? Have you been talking about it? We'd love to have your input on that too. And thank you very much. This will help move this along in a very positive manner. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council?
Yes, also, thank you for not using images of me on the scooter in your film. I appreciated that.
Oh, please, I wish you had. Other comments? Okay. Councilmember Roth?
Extremely impressed with the intelligence and thoughtfulness of the comments by the young people in that presentation. And of course, the work that went into the project, the whole idea, the whole concept, and the importance of the subject. But I really was just struck by just how articulate and how sharp these kids, young people are here tonight. And it makes me feel really good. It makes me feel, give me a little more hope for the future.
Yes.
Because it's in your hands.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, please don't be shy about reminding us about this need in the 3rd Street Park. Because we do a lot of things every week. We have a lot of meetings, and you know, sometimes we forget things. So please feel free to come back and remind us. Thank you all so much.
Other questions? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone for their presentation. And the slogan, "Unaccessible is unacceptable." I think that is very, very important. I think it needs to be repeated. And if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to rise and give you a handshake myself. And I'd like everyone here that's a part of this project to join me in saying that unaccessible is unacceptable. Please join me.
Sure.
Unacceptable is
Unacceptable.
One more time.
Inaccessible is unacceptable.
Thank you very much. All right.
Excellent work. Thank you so much. And Parks and Rec, and we'll be back in touch with you. We'll now go to, we're going to conclude public comment. I think there was another gentleman interested in public comment. It might be. Please step to the mic and introduce yourself if you have a comment.
I'm Daryl Bogus. I intended, before that last presentation, to speak in support of the Youth for Environmental Sustainability, but I was so impressed. I don't think you need any encouragement to appreciate their vision and the ability to recognize what's important and what's possible. I can briefly share with you a fairly recent example. At the high school level, I volunteered for several years locally in the subject of renewable energy, and we were just going at a slow walk pace. A good year for solar 5 years ago was 12 or 15 projects in the whole year for all companies total, until a mother and daughter and a few high school friends presented their proposal, which at first we thought was way too ambitious. The neighborhood south of campus, down by Bryant Park, had the largest number of solar homes anywhere, maybe in the whole Midwest. And they wanted to double that in 6 months. And we said, gee, that's nice, but we think that's overachieving. So they convinced us to help, and we agreed reluctantly. They exceeded the goal. That neighborhood now has more than 50 solar homes, and that was the basis for Solarize Bloomington. The next program will be next week, Tuesday, 7 o'clock, in this space. That became the basis for Solarize Indiana, which is now expanded to Evansville and Carmel and Muncie and Fort Wayne and South Bend. It started with a group of high school students right here. Without them, it never would have happened.
State your name again for the record. We didn't hear your full name.
Daryl Bogus.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Greg Alexander. I came here a couple months ago to say that after the sidewalk had been closed for a solid year at Rogers and between the Beeline and 11th Street, that it was finally open. It's closed again. It's utility work this time. There's just some cones and some safety tape, so you can't really go unless you're gonna rip up the safety tape. You can walk in the mud, but they dug a deep ditch in the mud. You can walk in the street on Rogers. If you want to walk in the street on Rogers as a pedestrian, you're welcome to. This is just what happened on College and Walnut, where I said it was closed for 5 years. It was just like this. There was a utilities project, then there was a bank, then there was a hotel. And soon we're going to have a parking garage right there. Are we going to close the sidewalk for the parking garage? Are we going to close the sidewalk for the sewer? And then are we going to close it for the gas? And then we're going to close it for the first business that moves in. And then we're going to close it for the second business that moves in. And the Trades District, when it was sold, I saw a very nice presentation here. I saw a bunch of papers I read. Again and again, a walkable development. Walkable. Walkable, 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 sustainable, walkable, bikeable, sustainable, walkable. That was in all of that propaganda. There was no parking garage in that propaganda. I'm sure somebody must have put it in a plan, but I didn't see it. It wasn't sold. It wasn't highlighted in the paper. Well, we're getting the parking garage. But the sidewalk's been closed for a solid year. It is now closed again. The sidewalk will close several times yet. Whenever there's a crew there, they just park in the bike lane. They just close the bike lane. They just park in the bike lane. No detour, no signs, no yellow tape, just construction workers parked in the bike lane. This is going to go on how many more years? So I want to change gears a little bit to something even less fun to talk about. So about a month ago, we have the what we call Bike Month, and there was a city event, Bike with the Mayor, and after that we went to Upland, right by here, and I saw a guy there that I rather liked, and he didn't make it through the night because he was killed by a car. It was outside of city limits if you really feel like that lets you off the hook. But Michael Brooks was there at this city event serving beers, and now he's dead. I think about his trip home that night in the city. How much bike infrastructure did he see that was blocked, that was incomplete, that had gaps? I can tell you almost all of it. How much did he see that wasn't designed according to the minimum standards from AASHTO and from MUTCD? You know, these are designed to prevent deaths, and our engineers just ignore them because they know there will be complaints, there will be people here, there will be Michael Cassidy here saying, oh, you can't do this, it'll kill my business. Well, this killed somebody that worked for Upland for a number of years and probably would have worked for Upland for a number more. Downtown businesses do pay the cost of your transportation decisions. When the parking garages were here, you said you want people to drive from Unionville to our downtown. I don't want people to make that drive. When the lady that killed Michael Brooks, she was in town for some reason. I don't know, but she rear-ended him on the way out of town. She was in town. She did what you wanted. She came here. I'm sure she spent money. You know, she used the parking that the zoning requires. She used the parking that was subsidized. I'm sure every intersection she met where there was construction, had clear signs, had maintained signs, had a maintained detour. I'm sure she didn't go a quarter of a mile out of her way to avoid going through 10th and the bypass. I am sure that when transportation issues came up where somebody said this will slow down cars, this will be too expensive, you guys found the way. You guys have already spent $12 million on a parking garage so that we can have the sidewalk closed for a year. If the trades district is just going to be the no sidewalk district, what are you doing here? I think this is an emergency. I think this is very important. I think that when you close infrastructure, the bike lane directly in front of Upland was closed that specific night for the trades district. That wouldn't have saved his life, but everything you guys have as priorities says to drivers, you should drive. You shouldn't go to a local business in Unionville. You should drive all the way to Bloomington. You shouldn't go to a local business in Ellisville. You should drive all the way to Bloomington. I don't want them to drive all the way to Bloomington. I think there is a high cost. For every 100 million miles traveled, somebody dies in a car. And that seems like a lot of miles, but you just added 500 new parking spaces. How far are those people going to drive? 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles every single day? Every work day for 30 years, you think that garage is going to be? How many people are going to die just because you guys spent $30 million on a parking garage? That's why this is so personal to me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comment. Other comments from the public? Okay, you have an opportunity at the end of our meeting if you would like to speak on items not on our agenda. So we'll move on now to appointments to boards and commissions. Are there any? Okay, I would like to, as council president, I am choosing to reconstitute the council rules committee. I name council members Piedmont Smith, Steve Volan, and Jim Sims, and city clerk Bolden as an ex officio member, excuse me. And the goal is to reconsider council processes and make them more efficient and effective. Do I require any vote, or is that? All right, terrific. We will now move to legislation for second reading and resolutions.
Mr. President, I move that ordinance 1911 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance 1911 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Title II, the Bloomington Municipal Code, entitled Administration and Personnel, regarding amending Chapter 2.21, entitled Department of Law, to prohibit discrimination and harassment of any person doing sanctioned work for the city. The synopsis reads as follows. This ordinance amends Title II, Administration and Personnel, of the Bloomington Municipal Code at the request of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission and staff. It provides that anyone doing sanctioned work for the city of Bloomington who feels she or he has been discriminated against or harassed by a city employee has the right to bring that concern to the appropriate city official, who will investigate the concern promptly and take appropriate action. It also requires contractors covered by the city's affirmative action requirements to implement a harassment policy for their employees. These changes will help ensure that anyone doing work for the city will have at least one avenue of redress should she or he encounter possible discrimination or harassment at work. This received a committee recommendation of due pass 207.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move that ordinance 1911 be adopted.
Second.
Very good. Ms. McKinney, would you like to present?
First of all, I want to say it's really not fair to follow the kids. This is really not, I don't appreciate that at all. I'm Barbara McKinney. I'm the director of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission and also an assistant city attorney. And I'm here to talk again about ordinance 1911. We had a fairly thorough discussion about it last week, so I won't repeat all of that, but I will give a quick summary for people who might have missed last week's meeting. Is my voice okay? Can you hear? Okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks.
The ordinance under consideration tonight was suggested by Mayor Hamilton and by Councilmember Granger, and it has the unanimous support of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission, who voted for it in April. And Ryan Shadday, who is the chair of the commission, is here, and I think he's going to speak about it as well. I appreciate the commission's support. What this ordinance does is fairly simple. It revises our public policy to make it clear that the city will not tolerate any of its employees harassing or discriminating against anyone who's doing work for the city, whether it's co-workers, independent contractors, interns, or volunteers. And frankly, if we had such a complaint right now, we would take it seriously and we would take appropriate action. But we were concerned that independent contractors might not know that we would take it seriously, and we want to make it clear to them that this was indeed our policy. So we want to change our public policy, and we'll include a provision in contracts going forward to let them know that this is our policy and that they have a right to complain. The ordinance also requires any contractor who has to submit an affirmative action plan to the city will also have to submit a harassment policy. This is something employers should already have. It's been part of the law for a long time. We're just nudging them to do the right thing. It reminds them of their obligations, and it will let employees know that they have an internal recourse should they ever experience harassment or discrimination on the job. Lots of questions came up last week that frankly I wasn't prepared to answer, so we prepared a memo that I believe Attorney Sherman has shared with you, and I hope that answers your questions. I want to thank my colleagues in legal who helped put that memo together pretty quickly, especially Philippa Guthrie and Larry Allen. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Are there questions from council? Well, we have an amendment. Would you like to offer the amendment, or shall we see appropriate time?
Sure, I move Amendment 1 to Ordinance 1911.
Second.
Please describe it.
This amendment just changes the binary gender identifier of she/he to include they. So it'd be he/she/they. So that's all it does.
Okay. Are there questions for the sponsor? Pretty straightforward. Okay. We'll go to the public if you would like to comment on the amendment, Amendment 1 of Ordinance 1911.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Shetty, and I'm the chair of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission. And I will keep this really brief because Ms. McKinney has done such a great job at this.
This is on Amendment 1, not on the ordinance as a whole.
We'll come back to the ordinance, but this is just for the amendment.
If you have a comment on Amendment 1, we'd like to hear it now.
We'd like to dispose of the amendment.
So just the change.
I would just like to say thank you for adopting the amendment.
Your name, please.
Jada B.
Thank you.
Community member. Thank you. I would just like to say thank you for this amendment. I think it is important. All city documents should start including non-binary individuals in their language, and I'm not sure how many others have before, but it should possibly become a standard practice for any ordinances that are put forth in front of this council. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Other comment? Okay, back to council for final comment. Anyone have a final comment?
Call the question.
Well, I would like to say that's an excellent point. We ought to review all of our legislation and find if this exists and amend it.
Second.
So the question's been called and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on Amendment 1?
Councilmember Ruff,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volan,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment passes. And thank you to the sponsors, Isabel Piedmont Smith and Dorothy Granger. So we're back now to the ordinance as amended, excuse me. And is there further
Questions.
We have questions? Okay, we'll go to questions.
So I had a question for, we're going to go to questions first. I had a question for Ms. McKinney. Can you comment at all on some of the, I mean, I know you wrote some responses. Can you summarize them for us, some of the responses you had to our questions that you weren't prepared to answer last week?
Well, one of the questions you had was whether there should be an independent commission to deal with some of the issues that we're talking about here. And our belief is that we don't really quite see how that would function or that it's really necessary. As I said in the memo, any employee who feels discriminated against or harassed has remedies, has effectively independent commissions to go to. They may file complaints with the Indiana Civil Rights Commission or with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission or both, and those agencies will do investigations, will, if they find discrimination occurred, will attempt to work out settlements, will in some cases take the matter to court. So those people are covered. So apparently, this independent commission would be dealing only with issues brought forward by independent contractors or volunteers or interns. And we don't have any reason to think that we've never had any of those complaints, so we don't have a reason to think there's a big problem that a commission is necessary to be created to address those problems, and we're not really sure what that commission would do that can't be done internally now, or if we had a really awful situation outside council could deal with. An independent commission could not reprimand anybody. I think we have enough internal and external processes in place that we didn't really see the need for independent commission.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes, I unfortunately did not realize what the memo that was sent to us was about, and therefore I did not read it all. So the question that I posed last week, could you please address it? It was, what if it was the mayor that was accused of some sort of harassment? Since the mayor is the boss of anybody who works for HR or any other department head.
Right, and we did address that in the memo, and as we said in the memo, we would investigate to the extent we could. We would talk to the witnesses, we would try to find out what happened, and we would take what actions we could to, like we said last week, separate the person who felt harassed from the mayor or take some other action that would work. If it were a situation where we just felt we couldn't do that because of conflicts of interest or whatever, we would hire outside counsel who would do that investigation for us, much as large corporations have done when a CEO is accused of misconduct, and they'll hire outside counsel to do a more independent investigation. So we would handle internally if we could, ethically, and we would hire outside counsel if we had to do that. We would be somewhat limited. You can't terminate a mayor because of that kind of thing, but we would do the best we could under those circumstances.
And as a follow-up, you mentioned a few minutes ago that there is an appeal process outside the city, the EOC, I think you said.
And the ICRC, both, right?
Are those available to people who are doing contract work for the
No,
city?
that's only for employees. I was saying if there were an independent commission, that wouldn't be something employees would need because they have the Indiana Civil Rights Commission or the EOC to investigate their complaints. But it would not be available for independent contractors, no.
So, but you still think an independent commission would not add value for an independent contractor who had a grievance?
We don't see what an independent commission could do that can't be done internally or externally. We don't see really any problem in this area anyway to justify having such a commission. We have never, and maybe we haven't had complaints because people don't know that they have an avenue to complain, that we would take it seriously. But at this point, we don't see any evidence of a problem that needs a commission to address. I'm not sure what the commission would do month to month, frankly.
Okay. I have another question, but I'll let somebody
please,
else
go ahead.
So what, if this ordinance passes this evening, what will the city do to make it clear to both employees and other individuals doing work on behalf of the city that these options are available? How is this going to be publicized?
Well, for employees, it's already in our employee manual, personnel manual, that we don't tolerate discrimination, that if you feel you've been discriminated against, this is what you do. And if they want to file with the EOC or the ICRC, they can come to my office and I'll give them the forms to do it. I mean, and that's in the manual too, that they know they can do that. I think most people would do it online now, but they can come and get the forms from me. As far as reaching independent contractors, it will be in all contracts going forward, a provision that we take this seriously. We want you to bring these problems to our attention. We will do what we can on your behalf. And that will be in the contracts. And also the fact that contractors are going to have to implement a harassment plan, they will communicate that to their employees, and we hope that will reach employees as well.
So there's, of course, two levels of, well, at least two levels of
Sure.
contractor. There's the, individual person who's going to do some consulting, and then there's
Right.
like a business, a
Right.
firm.
Huge company, sure.
So in the case of that individual, one or two person business, they, of course, wouldn't rise to the level of having a plan, a harassment plan, right? Unless it's $10,000 or more.
$10,000 or more for service, right? But they would be signing a contract with the city, and that contract will say, hey, if you feel mistreated, this is what you do.
Okay,
So they
all right.
will know from that, and
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the memo that clarified some
Thank you.
things.
You're welcome.
I was one of the folks who asked last week about possible recall votes for elected officials.
And that's not
it's clearly
possible.
stated that it's not possible, so I appreciate that. I was educated. But my question is, has or will current contractors or interns or volunteers, have they or will they be informed of this policy update should we pass it, and what is the plan for involving and educating folks?
Going forward, they'll be informed through the contracts that you're
yes,
discussing or during
yes.
orientation for volunteers or interns. I hadn't really thought about how we'd reach current contractors. They've already signed their contract.
Yes.
They don't have to do a harassment plan because that wasn't in place when they signed their contracts. Frankly, I'd have to give that some thought and think how we can reach those people. But a lot of contractors have contract after contract after contract with us. They do work over the years. So even if they don't know right now, they're going to know the next time a contract is up for them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Just a point of information, I'm sure there are quite a few interns here at the City of Bloomington from the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, and I can tell you that internally in our internship agreements, our students are very well informed about our harassment policy at IU, which is very clear. If they experience anything in the workforce, they are to first contact us at SPIA, and then we are to then contact the host organization to
Right.
make sure any issue is dealt with. So again, there are probably other interns here besides O'Neill school students, but ours are very carefully trained.
And that may be quite a few of our interns.
I would
think,
assume
yeah.
so. Thank you.
And volunteers and contractors.
I had one, Ms. McKinney, about, so if a complaint, say it is the administrator, the mayor, who is the offending party, would the Human Rights Commission automatically review it, or would they send it to a independent counsel, or is the independent counsel only an option in the event of interference? How does that proceed?
Human Rights Commission wouldn't be involved because I represent the city in that sort of area, so,
Okay.
and Human Rights Commission cannot investigate the city itself. It just would be kind of awkward to do that. I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of your question. I apologize.
Okay, at what point do you decide that an independent counsel is required?
It's really how the attorney involved, and I would probably be involved in that sort of thing, feels that they can't go forward with investigation without violating their ethical rules. And it's the kind of thing we've dealt with in legal before. I mean, this would be different having somebody outside, but I represent the city in unemployment cases. Occasionally we have a good friend of mine who's lost his or her job, or their job, I guess I should say, and they file for unemployment. I can't represent the city in that case because there would be a conflict. It would not be proper for me to do that. So somebody else in legal does that. It would be that same kind of analysis, but in that case, it may need to go outside the legal department itself.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then we'll go to the public. If the public would like to comment on Ordinance 1911 as amended.
I think it's my turn now.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
All right, once again, I'm Ryan Shaddy, and I am the chair of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission. And I will keep this brief really quickly because Ms. McKinney and our commission have both done a great job working on and passing this resolution. I would like to thank her for getting this on our plate and on to you in a timely manner. With that said, as an independent contractor myself, I find this resolution important and past due, with it kind of mind-boggling to me that it hasn't come to our attention before now. Bloomington should be on the forefront of any human rights issue, ensuring that we remain the beacon that Indiana should strive to be. I hope that our commission and this council will continue to be on top of these problems, not only when they arise, but before they arise as well. Thank you for your time and your consideration of this important topic.
Thank you for your comment. Please step forward and state your name for the record.
My name is Brandon Drake. I just want to say thank you, for one thing, for taking this up and for the revision. Also, I want to know, like, if it's possible. One of the things that I experienced was conflict of interest. It was thick and heavy with my case. And so I would like for the council to consider, and Barbara to consider looking into other, like to the commission, outside commission, as an option in case there is conflict of interest all around the person who's report. When everybody's friends and people are appointing friends to committees and people are appointing, like that can be very scary for a person experiencing that. They don't know where to go. So like an outside commission possibly that they could at least report to and start the process. Someplace safe outside of city council, outside of I know everybody here is probably a good person, but you just never know. I mean, I thought there were a lot of good people around me at the time too. So I just keep it in mind, and I would like for you to keep the option open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
Kate Blake, and I just want to thank you again for considering this ordinance and for the amendment as well, and I hope you pass it.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
Jada B. once more. I want to say thank you again for considering this ordinance and the amendment to it as well. What Mr. Drake was talking about in particular, that we're just worried about loopholes, right? And so any way that we can think of to close any loopholes and dot all the I's and cross all the T's to make sure everyone is protected at all times is the key to this. That's why we put forth the idea of making sure that we were putting they, them language into the ordinance. And I appreciate the Human Rights Commission, Council, can't remember, on their, realizing that there could be some conflicts of interest, but always having outside input on anything that could have outside, conflicts of interest is always necessary. And in particular, if involving the citizens in that process is always the best way forward, because we can help be watchdogs and keep an eye out as we are not entrenched in the establishment. So think about those sorts of things. I would think about those sorts of things in all commissions and in all bodies that investigate, using the community and using the citizens to help keep an eye on things and making sure that everything is above board. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Please step up and state your name.
Good evening. Good evening to all, but especially to any members of the audience that are contractors of any kind, or independent contractors, or aspiring to be contractors. My name is Kenneth Schaefer. I know more than a little bit of what I'm about to talk to you about, having had a 40-year career as a true independent contractor, performing over 35 engagements for more than 25 different clients in both government and corporate areas. I do feel a need to speak up for my profession, especially when there are so many omissions and so much misleading blather in the current discussion. I have two overarching recommendations. One is that you consider a friendly amendment to the language replacing the phrase independent contractor with contracted personnel. I will set forth the reasons for this in just a little bit. The inaccurate and inappropriate use of independent contractor can be problematic for you, the city, and for the contractors themselves. My second recommendation is that you strongly consider Ms. McKinney's position of approving the ordinance amendments in the briefest language possible, leaving it to the Human Rights Commission, Human Resources, and City Legal to flesh out the details. I am satisfied that that is the way things have been resolved. As I will describe below, there are a number of important areas for which no questions are being asked, areas that are ill understood, and city administration will need flexibility with the details, its policies and procedures, to continue to tweak the policies and procedures to adjust to changing conditions and to respond to a better understanding of the issues. I set forth 4 reasons that this flexibility is needed. Number 1, there are several different kinds of contracting, not just one kind called independent contracting. In fact, independent contracting is actually a small minority share of overall contracting. Here I am speaking primarily of using contractors for what is known as staff augmentation or contingent workforce, with which I believe the council and the administration have very little experience. These different types include contract employees, brokered contractors, direct contractors, contract for hire, and term employees. Each of these is particularly well suited to a certain set of business conditions. I will not go into detail about them now. The designation of independent contractor arose not so much from a label of what was needed to solve a business problem, but rather as a federal Internal Revenue Service tax guideline. Reason 2, there are case studies and applicable employment labor law regarding retroactive reclassification of contractors as de facto employees. Inadequate attention to these aspects puts the city at risk, significant risk, of paying very large sums of money to such reclassified individuals in the form of compensation of unrealized benefits, such as health insurance, vacations, and pension contributions. In other words, the city, in its attempt to treat contractors just like employees, runs the risk of having them reclassified as de facto employees in the full sense, with all the retroactive financial liability thereof. Third reason, there are also case studies and applicable employment and labor law regarding reclassification as it pertains to paying tax withholding. In a nutshell, if the city is not careful in its language and procedures, the IRS can dun the city for all taxes that were not withheld and paid, because the city mistakenly thought it was unnecessary to do so because it was dealing with, quote, independent contractors. Fourth point, during the discussion at the June 5th meeting, I heard very little about any significant number of independent contractors, especially senior independent contractors and other kinds of contractors, like I just mentioned, or the contract services firms who provide staff augmentation. I didn't hear any discussion about them being surveyed as to how they feel about these proposed changes. It is foolhardy to make ordinance changes in a vacuum, which, as far as I can tell, completely avoids looking at the business impact.
Mr. Schaefer, you've taken about 6 minutes, and I wondered are you near concluding? Could you conclude in about a minute or so?
I think a minute is
Very
plenty.
good. Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me. I do appreciate it. In closing, I state that any ordinance change made with good intentions by well-meaning people, which is impractical and unwieldy, will serve only to make its proponents feel better about being on the right side of the issue. But it will have no practical effect because it is unimplementable and unenforceable. A perfect example is the phrase prohibiting a contractor from retaliating against an employee for complaining about harassment. If you deny contractors the wherewithal to solve their problems on their own and at the lowest possible levels, any complainant working for a contract services firm will be supported by that firm only in the short term, and in the long term, the individual will be thought of as a troublemaker for unduly burdening the client, since the contractor's job is to get the work done and not to create additional problems for the client. contract services firm attitude will be, I thought you were a professional. We certainly paid you like one. You should have been able to figure this out on your own and handle it without raising our firm's profile at the highest level of the client. So I thank you very much for indulgence. I appreciate it. Certainly willing to talk to anybody with their own experience about being an independent contractor, and I'd like to talk to you about what I believe is in your true interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order. I would like to ask a member of the public to stay at the podium for a moment as I ask this question.
Okay, well,
Point of order?
does that conclude? I'd like to determine if we concluded public comment. Anyone else
Well,
like to?
this has to do with public comment.
Are you would like to ask a question of Mr. Schaefer?
No, I'd like to ask a question, a procedural question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Maybe I missed it, but I don't recall taking a vote to limit public comment on this item to 5 minutes per person.
Yes, I was using my discretion at this point because we have a full agenda.
He
Just to
wasn't
determine-
required to quit. The councilmember asked him to if he could finish his comments in a timely fashion.
I would suggest that we have a long tradition, particularly in regular sessions, of when we are going to limit public comment on an agenda item, that we pass, we take a vote and we agree or disagree to do that. And I would say that if the gentleman was not completed with his comments or hurried or passed over something in order to try and bring it under the suggested time, that he be allowed to return to the podium and finish any comments he might have.
Mr. Schaefer, were you able to conclude your comment? And could you just indicate yes or no?
I read the rules for public comment ahead of time, so I was familiar with the limit. I feel like that I have been accorded sufficient time. I will say that I did have to abbreviate my remarks some, but I'm certainly willing to compensate for that just by doing a copy and paste follow-up with HTO. So anybody who wants to read my full set of comments can just go to HTO online.
I would like to make a quick
Please,
comment.
Councilmember Ruff.
I'd just like to clarify for the sake of the public, and particularly the current speaker, that there's not a 5-minute time limit or any time limit on public comment on a specific item, agenda item, unless the council makes that a motion to that effect at the start of the meeting. And we didn't do that tonight. So there wasn't the time limit that you felt there was. I'm glad that you were able to get your comments in, and it's been a long meeting. There's a lot left on the agenda, and we appreciate the brevity or your efforts to get your comments made. I mean, I read your email you sent, which was several pages long, and but I just want to clarify that for the record.
Thank you for your comment, and I regret that I should have inquired in terms of how much time you thought you had remaining.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I know that rule is the case for committees of the whole. I believe that because committees of the whole are less formal, that we don't have time limits unless we set them. But generally speaking, we've hewn to a 5-minute rule for a while, including an open public comment. Mr. Sherman, am I correct about this in regular session?
You have done that in the past.
Done what?
You have limited comment in the past without a vote. Without a vote.
That the chair simply says
it
it.
is not in writing. And so you both have a point here.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't recall, and maybe I was not at the meetings, but I would disagree with Mr. Sherman. I do not recall limiting public comment on agenda items, formally limiting them without a motion and some kind of a vote. Thank you.
Thank you for that observation. Are there any other public comments related to ordinance 1911?
Are you going to vote now?
We're getting close.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, we're back to council for final comment and perhaps a motion, or questions, if you prefer questions. Councilmember Volin.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Sherman, and frankly, of Ms. McKinney. I'm blanking on people's names now. What do you think of Mr. Schaefer's comment that the idea between independent contractor and contracted personnel, is there a term of art that we're required to use? Is there a problem swapping this out? How might this affect the
In
ordinance?
this case, I will defer to Council McKinney.
Ms. McKinney, what say you?
We really don't endorse changing the term independent contractor to contracted personnel. The term independent contractor has a very clear meaning in the law. It's used in cases a lot, it's used in regulation. Contracted personnel does not have that kind of established, understood meaning. The word personnel implies employee, which would cause problems. These people are not employees, and we don't want them to be seen as employees. It's really important, as Mr. Schaefer said, that we classify people properly as either independent contractors or employees. It matters in discrimination cases, which we've been talking about, but also in workers' comp cases, in liability cases, in taxes, Social Security, benefits, all sorts of things. And often this question ends up in court. And when the court has to determine whether somebody is an independent contractor or an employee, they look at a number of different factors that are intertwined to make that determination. And it's unduly complicated. I won't bore you with all 8 of the factors, or 9, or whatever they are. But one factor they look at is that the intention of the parties. Do the parties intend to create an employee-employer relationship or an independent contractor relationship? If we use the term contracted personnel, that could be seen as meaning we intended to create an employee relationship. And if there were any other factors that went that way as well, the court could make the determination that somebody we thought was an independent contractor is now considered an employee and would be entitled to some benefits that we hadn't anticipated and we hadn't budgeted for. So we really don't think that that's a good idea.
So just to be clear, while Mr. Schaefer may have had some points about his concern about the different colors of contracted personnel,
Right.
that independent contractor is a term of art, is a
Right.
legal term rather,
Right.
and that its meaning in the legal system and in court is known, whereas contracted personnel is not, and could be misinterpreted because case law is insufficient to have tested it.
Yeah, exactly. And he mentioned that there are things besides independent contractors and employees. I think the policy covers that by saying this policy of being able to complain about harassment and discrimination applies to anybody including independent contractors, volunteers, interns, and anyone doing sanctioned work for the city. So I think it's broad enough to cover anyone.
Isn't it presumed that contractor is independent by definition?
Well, we have to weigh all the factors, and it really depends.
Are there dependent contractors? Are there?
I never heard of a dependent contractor. I'm not sure what that would mean. But
Okay.
I think normally you're right. But sometimes it can get complicated. If somebody is paid by the hour, we think they're an independent contractor, we pay them by the hour, that might look like an employee relationship. I mean, it just gets fuzzy sometimes.
Is the legal department reluctant to examine the term? I mean, we don't have to do it tonight, but perhaps if that does better serve the city's needs, we might re-examine this at some point, that actual term.
I suppose we could do that, but I'm very clear that that we would not want to use the term contracted personnel. And I talked to Mike Rooker, who's our risk attorney, and he had the same concerns as I do. The definitions are the same in both risk and equal employment issues, and it just would really go down a road that I don't think we want to go down to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg, did you have a question?
No question. Ready for comment.
Other questions? Ms. Guthrie, do you have any comment on objections raised by, that haven't been covered by Ms. McKinney? Yes, they've been covered. Okay.
Comments then?
Comments? Councilmember Sandberg for comment.
Thank you. I will be in support of this as amended, and I do appreciate Ms. McKinney's excellent work. She provided really great information for us regarding all the many questions that were raised last time, including removal of elected officials. She quoted 8 citations from Indiana Code that dealt with that, as well as 2 from our own Bloomington Code that thoroughly goes through that. It was very educational. I appreciated that. She also covered the bypass procedure, which has been questioned, and that covers the conflict of interest that we're all concerned about, loopholes that we may be concerned about. And if I could quote, she said, "If we did not think this could be done objectively, or if we thought it could not be done without a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict, we would hire someone external to conduct the investigation." Once again, we have outstanding legal staff here. We get outstanding legal guidance, and I'm very satisfied with all the answers that were provided here, including, your explanation about the contractual language. So I feel comfortable that this is a fine piece of work, and I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I plan to support, or we already have the amendment, and also plan to support the ordinance. And I also want to thank continued public comment from those that are involved here. As my colleague Sandberg, Councilmember Sandberg just said, I think the statement, any person doing sanctioned work for the city, covers everything that we're concerned with this evening. I also believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that should we wish to add other amendments or change it in the future, then we have that authority and that option. So I think where we've come to the updates to where we are now, I think it's sufficient. And again, I want to reiterate, and I agree as well, I have confidence in our legal staff in researching and doing what they presented to us this evening. There could be opportunities for an independent commission, or a necessity, I should say, in some other situation. But you also have the same potential for legal remedies that may be outside of what we're talking. We're talking about persons sanctioned to do work. That includes contractors, interns, volunteers, as we've stated. So I'm fairly confident and happy with the work our legal folks have done. And as I stated earlier, I plan to support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I'm in support of the ordinance, and I think it's a good idea, regardless of anything that has happened in the last 4 months. It's just a good idea.
Other comments? I'll support this. I appreciate the amendment. I think it's a very good observation by J2B that we ought to think about all city code and amending it to that respect. And I think, referring to Mr. Drake's, what Mr. Drake mentioned, it still bears considering, I think, that someone who's suffered the trauma of harassment should not be in fear of intimidation in the process. And I'm a little bit wary of having someone at a very high position, for instance, the mayor of the city, being in a position where the process can be, where that intimidation can be reflected. So, but as Councilmember Sims said, we could revisit this. So I think we might think about it in the future. But for now, this is a very good start. Councilmember Volin, do you have a comment?
Yeah, your comment, and there was another one made. I was satisfied with the answer about why an independent commission would not be practical. As I said at the Committee of the Whole, I've been working on a different kind of independent commission about redistricting city council seats and running into the problem that the city council can't throw the question if they reject a proposal from an independent commission to the courts, because state law doesn't allow the courts to have jurisdiction over the council. So what to do if the council decides to reject something that affects its own turf, shall we say. In the same way, we should be concerned about what if the mayor, for example, is, there's no impeachment clause that state law gives to municipalities. So, but I am satisfied with the idea that the Human Resources Department can adequately investigate that issue in the same way that I'm confident that the controller, who is a department head of the city, is also has a separate responsibility given to them by the state to certify the veracity and the accuracy of our budget numbers. So we have precedent for that, and you can see that because in third-class cities, the clerk is also the treasurer, but in second-class cities, the treasurer gets split off and becomes the controller who reports to the mayor. So we do have precedent for something that directly affects the office of an elected official. And so I'm confident that that will work, even though we all need to make sure we pay close attention to, to every elected official and to every department head, and to make sure that everyone is sort of following the code that we set out for ourselves. So having said that, I'm satisfied with it, and I feel comfortable supporting this ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Do we have a recommendation?
Call the question.
Second.
Okay, the question's been called, and we have a second on ordinance 1911 as amended. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Bolin,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Thank you. That ordinance is adopted 6-0. Thank you all for coming. All right.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 1911 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that, Resolution 1911 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 1911, the Bloomington Youth for Environmental Sustainability Society's Resolution for Environmental Responsibility and Improvement. The synopsis reads as follows. This resolution is sponsored by Councilmember Rallo. The resolution is the product of Youth for Environmental Sustainability, YES, and outlines ways to mitigate the effects of climate change by setting emission and natural gas use reduction goals, methods for reducing CO2 emissions, and encouraging renewable sources of energy. This had no committee recommendation.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 1911 be adopted.
Is there a second?
Second.
If the council would indulge me, I'd like to read the resolution. Excuse me. This is Resolution 1911, the Bloomington Youth for Environmental Sustainability, YES, Society's Resolution for Environmental Responsibility and Improvement. Whereas in the last decade, Indiana residents have experienced record-breaking heat waves, cold spells, and floods, which have shut down roads, damaged homes and businesses, prolonged construction projects, and made farming increasingly difficult. And whereas the number of extremely hot days per year in southern Indiana is projected to rise between 38 and 51 by mid-century, these changes in Indiana climate are projected to increase the amount of energy that Hoosier businesses need to cool commercial buildings by 20%. And whereas the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, found that the average temperature in Indiana has risen by 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1895 and is expected to increase by 5 or more degrees by 2050. And whereas carbon emissions raise global temperatures by trapping solar energy in the atmosphere, and whereas combustion of fossil fuels can lead to increased amounts of air pollutants such as nitrous oxides, sulfur oxides, volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter. This reduced air quality leads to increased risk of asthma attacks, high blood pressure, and heart disease, and it can exacerbate symptoms of mental illness such as anxiety and depression. Nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds lead to ground-level ozone production and smog. And whereas record-setting highs for annual global mean temperatures have been recorded 12 times since 1979, with 2014, 2015, and 2016 each breaking the record. And whereas Indiana's frost-free season, in which the temperature continuously stays above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, has been extended by an average of 9 days beyond what it was in 1895. By 2050, it is projected that the frost-free season will extend up to weeks beyond the 1915 to the 2013 average. This will cause an increase in insect-borne diseases such as those carried by mosquitoes, ticks, and parasites. And whereas Purdue's University Indiana Climate Change Assessment found that the temperature increases decrease soil moisture retention, and extreme rain events cause soil erosion and nutrient runoff. These effects of climate change are a threat to important Indiana crops such as corn, wheat, and soybeans, as shown by the EPA findings that high temperature events have caused over $1 billion in heat-related losses to agriculture, industry, especially farmers. And whereas increasing temperatures will increase the rate at which blue-green algae can grow, this algae is very common in Indiana lakes and streams and is known to have deleterious effects on human health, such as vomiting, nausea, fever, and skin irritation upon skin contact or inhalation, and in rare cases, life-threatening effects. And whereas increasing temperatures cause changes in habitats and encourage invasive species, and higher concentrations of carbon dioxide promote the growth of plants like poison ivy and ragweed. And whereas the average Bloomington resident is burning over 20 metric tons of CO2 per year, and whereas grid-supplied electricity is the greatest source of CO2 emissions in Bloomington, Indiana, and whereas the Purdue Indiana Climate Change Impacts Assessment Report estimated that the average annual precipitation in Indiana has increased 5.6 inches since 1895, with winters and springs experiencing heavier rain and snowfall, increasing the likelihood of flooding and polluting water as sewer systems overflow, which can be shown through the fact that due to annual precipitation increase, there have been around 60 sewer discharges per year in Indianapolis alone, sending 8 billion gallons of untreated sewage into the White River, worsening both water quality and crop productivity. And whereas non-commercial vehicles in Bloomington emitted 96,061 metric tons of CO2, and commercial vehicles in Bloomington emitted 20,730 metric tons of CO2 in 2015 alone. And whereas the members of the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability, the members of the Bloomington City Council, and Bloomington Mayor Hamilton have consistently shown themselves to be advocates for and allies of the environment and public health, now therefore be it hereby resolved by the Common Council of the City of Bloomington, Monroe County, Indiana, that Section 1, the City of Bloomington will encourage all new commercial buildings and all new city-owned buildings to be constructed with at least half of the roof being a green roof, a solar roof, a white roof, or a sand roof. A green roof would require the rooftop space to be covered in vegetation in an attempt to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and back into the plants and soil. A solar roof would require solar panels covering the rooftop space in order to generate electricity for the building and or the city as a whole. A white roof or sand roof would require buildings to have roofs painted completely white, covered in sand, which would increase the building's albedo and help in lowering the temperature in and around Bloomington. With increasing innovation, it is understood that if there is another technology that would increase the surface albedo of a building roof, it should be accepted. Section 2, the community of Bloomington will aim to reduce net emissions by 28% by 2025, calculated from extrapolated data to represent emissions during 2005 as called for by the Paris Climate Accord, and 80% by 2050. Section 3, the community of Bloomington will aim to cut by 15% the use of natural gas for space heating by the year 2025, either through space heating via renewable energy sources or by making efficiency improvements. In addition to this, the City of Bloomington will also increase the percentage of energy that is renewable for the next 10 calendar years by an average margin of equal to or greater than 0.5% per year. Section 4, as city park facility and trail drinking fountains are retired, the City of Bloomington will replace them with stations that include water bottle fillers. The City of Bloomington will consider non-freeze refillable water bottle stations in future projects. In addition, the City of Bloomington will work with and encourage entities such as Monroe County Public Library and the Bloomington Public Transportation Corporation to provide public water bottle refilling stations to the public. This would decrease CO2 emissions by abstaining from the consumption of excess single-use plastics and unnecessary transport of water. Section 5, by 2030, contingent on funding, the City of Bloomington will provide increased walking and biking accessibility within the city limits, particularly to all public schools, in order to reduce the number of automobiles used daily by high school students and parents. The city could begin this process by adding trails off the B-line that allow for safe and efficient travel, and by installing more multi-use pathways, protected bike lanes, or other high-comfort bicycle infrastructure. The city will strive to achieve platinum bike certification standards awarded by the League of American Bicyclists. In Section 6, the City of Bloomington will seek to plant trees of equal diameter breast height for every tree that is removed from city-owned property in order to remove carbon from the air and create a better, safer community. During this replacement process, the City of Bloomington will put an emphasis on biodiversity and using native Indiana plants and trees, giving preference to native species with a higher rate of carbon sequestration. In addition to this, the City of Bloomington will also work with local scientists, researchers, and community members to find new and innovative methods of carbon sequestration and reduction of heat island effect. That is the resolution. Thank you for your indulgence, and we will go to Ms. Maurer. Would you like to?
Right now, it's still updating, but the students are so amazing, they have it memorized, so they can still go.
Okay, very good. Please step forward and state your names.
I'm Maddie Clemmer.
And I'm Jared Alexander.
Council members and citizens of Bloomington, thank you for coming and staying to hear our resolution tonight. We're here to present our resolution for environmental improvement and responsibility in Bloomington. I'm Maddie Clemmer. I'm a student at Indiana University and a recent graduate from Bloomington High School South.
And I'm Jared Alexander, a recent graduate from Bloomington High School North and a future attendee of Indiana University. All right, so our group, the Youth for Environmental Sustainability, came together almost 2 years ago when we were all in environmental science classes. And it originally arose out of a project for us all to write whereas statements for a hypothetical resolution that we would present to the City Council. And after doing so, a group of us from North and South in the Academy got together and decided that we actually wanted to write the resolution and present it to the City Council. And so from that, the Youth for Environmental Sustainability was born, and we presented a little over a year ago to the City Council preliminarily, and now we're here again for the real thing.
Yeah. So since the last time we presented to City Council, we've been to many groups in Bloomington to ask for their support, and you'll find the letters of support in your packet. I'm going to go through and read the commissions that did give us letters of support and thank them now. We have the Historic Preservation Commission, Bloomington Public Transportation Corporation, Monroe County Public Library, Bloomington Parks and Recreation, Bloomington Commission on Sustainability, and the Bloomington Tree Commission.
And then in addition to those commissions and organizations that gave us letters of support, we also went to different community engagements to make sure that the public was in support of our resolution and to get the broadest support possible before we brought it before the City Council. So some of the things that we did, we presented at Green Drinks behind Upland. We presented at Woke Wednesday at Bloomington High School North. We had a booth at Bloomington Bird Fest. We were some of the keynote speakers at the Youth for Environmental Leadership Summit at Indiana University. We presented at ICE's screening of Chasing Ice, and we presented to environmental science classes at Bloomington High School North, Bloomington High School South, and the Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship.
Okay. So now I'm going to start talking about the resolution with which President Dave Rollo just read to all of us. It's usually up on the PowerPoint, but we'll just have to imagine it's there. So the first section is about roofing. In AP Environmental Science, we learned that roofing can be used for more than just covering a building, and it has a lot of potential. So some of the things that we want to encourage buildings within Bloomington to put on their roofs are solar panels, which would generate energy for a building, a green roof, which would act as a carbon sink to sequester carbon, and then a white roof, which would decrease the surface or increase the surface albedo of the roof, reflecting sunlight so it's a little cooler. One of the things that I wanted to mention about Section 1 was that after our first presentation, we left room when we went through and edited it to include future technologies because we don't want to discredit any future innovation that could help the environment more than the roofing that we've suggested now.
So section 2 covers reducing net emissions, and the first piece of the section comes from the Paris Climate Agreement, which after the U.S. removed itself from that agreement, Mayor John Hamilton signed the city of Bloomington to keep committing to. And so the first piece of the section is a net reduction of 28% by 2025. Which is also present in the Sustainability Action Plan that was passed by this body. And then the second piece is that it will be followed up by, an 80% reduction will happen by 2050.
So section 3 of the resolution is about natural gas usage in Bloomington. And one of the things that we'd like to limit is natural gas usage for space heating because we can see other potential energy sources that are non-fossil fuel based, which would be much better for the environment. And but we didn't want to limit new innovative ways to use methane that's collected off of landfills or something else that could be used for transportation or other energy, other things that need energy in the future.
All right, and then section 4 arose out of us as citizens of Bloomington noticing that a lot of public areas lacked the infrastructure for someone to refill their water bottle after a use. And so through negotiations with Bloomington Parks and Recreation, we were able to come to an agreement that as existing water fountain infrastructure is removed and replaced, that those new fountains will include technology to refillable water bottles, and therefore this will act as a way that the city of Bloomington can encourage people to use refillable water bottles instead of single-use plastic water bottles.
So section 5 comes from my determination to bike to South High School during my time there. And I realized that the accessibility of biking to South is not very good, but it's better than the other high schools in Bloomington. So since then, I've tried to bike to the other high schools, and it's not gone super well. The academy is somewhat bike accessible, but right now with construction and also with a lack of connectivity to the B line, it's not awesome. And Bloomington North really has no safe bike access. So section 5 is about just providing more bike access contingent on funding by 2030 to all public schools in Bloomington.
And then section 6, so we noticed when we were writing the resolution that a lot of trees were being removed throughout the constant construction in Bloomington. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't decreasing the number of trees because we think it provides a lot of good things for the community. And so while, so this section basically makes it so that the city kind of has to keep the biomass of the trees at a stable level. And we also leave room we want to encourage biodiversity and we want to encourage the use of native species, but we also want to give flexibility to the arborists and other officials in charge of planting these trees and choosing which trees will be planted to choose the correct trees in their opinion.
Now I'd like to bring up Emma Hickman. She's a rising senior at Bloomington High School South, and she is an active member of BHSS SAGE Club.
Hi, as Maddie Clemmer just stated, I am Emma Hickman. Throughout my high school experience, I was able to study environmental science this year, and one topic we discussed vigorously in our class is climate change and what we can do to make a difference. This resolution specifically is one way we can all make a difference. It is important Bloomington implement this climate resolution in order to combat our changing climate. Change is happening that will affect all citizens of Bloomington. As stated in the resolution, the average temperatures in Bloomington have risen by 1.2 degrees since 1895, and it is expected to exceed 5 degrees by 2050. This increase in the next 30 years will be double that from the previous 125 years. This severe increase in such a short span shows how important these next few years are. While the changes may seem far into the future, in 2050 I will only be 48, the same age as many of our community leaders. I do not want to wait until 2050 to make changes and fight problems that will already be too big to stop. This resolution includes many new changes that will lead Bloomington on a path to a greener and sustainable future, capable of combating climate-related problems. As a member of BHS's SAGE, Students Advocating for a Greener Environment, this resolution brings solutions to problems that we have discussed throughout the years, like better transportation and the implementation of reusable water bottle filling stations in order to decrease our school and community single-use waste. Let us not only make Bloomington a more sustainable community, but a model to communities across the state. Thank you.
All right, and then up next we have Arpan Bose from Bloomington High School North.
Today I come to you all with a complete support of this climate resolution. In my opinion, there is no obstacle that poses a greater threat to our future generations than climate change. While climate change effects may be depressing, we have the ability to make a focused effort to make an improvement. A castle cannot be built overnight. It is built brick by brick. Similarly, resolving climate change will require many building blocks. This resolution would not only be a huge step forward for Bloomington, but in the future, all across the U.S., Bloomington could be seen as a foundation for climate change. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you guys will join us in saving the future of this earth.
Now I'd like to bring up Emma Sire. She's the secretary of the Bloomington Lake Action Committee at Bloomington High School South.
Hi, as she said, I'm Emma Sire. I'm the secretary of Lake Action Committee. One of our presidents is actually right there. We basically just try to strive for better lake health and whatever. But I run cross country at South. I think this climate resolution is, for one, really important for the stability of all the ecosystem around Bloomington, which is really important for everybody basically who runs. I think that it's vital that we come together as a community to do our part in preventing the destruction of not only Bloomington's beauty, but around the nation and the world. A lot of these little things are pretty easy to do, I feel like, and they can combine to create a really large effect. But bigger than that is the overall precedent that this sets for other communities, both in Indiana and across the country. It's important that we contribute and we can make little adjustments to protect our planet and ourselves.
Now we have a lot of people to thank who helped us along the way. Some people, I may not get all of the names right now. Hopefully Jarrett can help me. But we'd like to thank Ben Brabson and Michael Hamburger, both IU scientists who fact-checked our resolution to make sure that we were scientifically accurate as we went along. We'd like to thank Dave Roloff for sponsoring our resolution. We'd like to thank Paula McDewitt for writing a letter of support from the Parks and Recreation. We'd like to thank Dave Williams and Beth Rosenbarger for meeting with us to discuss some of our plans in the resolution.
We'd like to give a big thanks to Teddy Phillipson Maurer for being our adult advisor in this, and we could not have done this without her. We were the driving force, but she helped us pave the way.
Yeah, we'd like to thank both of our teachers from Bloomington's High Schools South and North, Amanda Fagola and Angie Shelton, who's in the audience. And we'd like to thank Jim Poyser for the idea of a youth-led climate resolution. And that's about all of that.
Yeah, and we'd like to thank all of the city council for taking time to hear our resolution. And we also, no matter how, the outcome of this, we would like to urge you to let this be a guiding light to including young people in all discussions in the community. Because we have unique insight, we have new ideas, and we are committed when we're passionate about issues, so we shouldn't be written off just because we're younger. And I want to thank you again for your time, and thank all of you for staying the whole time to listen to us. So does anyone have any questions for us?
Thank you for that presentation. I'm sure we have questions. Who would like to begin? Councilmember Volin.
First of all, thanks for everyone's patience that we had a full schedule tonight, fuller than I thought, and some of you have sat for almost 3 hours to make this presentation. So thank you. The first question I have is, do the students from Bloomington North and South represent their schools, or were they simply students at Bloomington North and South who were part of the organization?
They're not here to represent their schools. They're just here to speak.
I just saw the gentleman has student council on his shirt, and so I thought maybe he represented the student council. I wasn't sure, but I just wanted to make sure of that. Okay. Finally, I have one question about Section 5. Did any thought go into the siting and design of the schools of Bloomington themselves? In other words, bachelor middle schools in the middle of nowhere. A lot of schools are set way back from the street. They don't engage with the city. Bloomington South is a great example. It's, Bloomington North is as far north as you can get, I think. And Bloomington South is way set back, and it's on basically Walnut Street's a major highway. Was there any talk about bringing the buildings closer to the street so that there's less need or less perception that cars are necessary, or that it's easier to walk to? What say you?
No, there was no discussion on bringing the schools closer to the city, because that seemed like a very
It's a long-term
grand
thing.
to do, just a very large thing. But we did talk about, we were asked at one time to try to create routes to the different high schools, the safest route, and we're not engineers, so we did look into it and we did try to find the safest routes, but there were some places where we just could not find a safe, accessible, comfortable bike route, including Bloomington High School North.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I want to thank this group for presenting. And I am also encouraged, that many of these initiatives were for city-owned property and city facilities. I think it's a lot better to implement than getting into the private sector. I also appreciate terminology like we will aim to do some things as opposed to mandating, and contingent on funding. Even at your young ages, I think you understand that there are funding and revenue limitations to some of the things, so I'm encouraged by that. Now, a more practical question with water refilling stations or potential, and I know this is simple, but will they be scheduled to shut off when the park closes? Now I'm assuming that that'll happen, but it wasn't mentioned anywhere.
Yeah, so for the water bottle filling stations, the outdoor ones will be scheduled to shut off at the same time as the water fountain will, because it will be connected.
Correct.
So it's all one piece that will shut off at the same time. And for the outdoor filling stations, there's one outdoor filling station that will be open year-round, and that's the one in Switchyard Park, and that one won't shut off. That's the only outdoor filling station so far.
Yeah, and so we met with Dave Williams to talk about the water bottle filling stations. And so the reason that one at Switchyard won't be turned off is because it's inside of a building, and therefore the water, they don't have to provide excess heat to keep the pipe cool in the winter. Whereas the ones that are independent of any structure, they would have to install new infrastructure to heat the pipes. And so I think your question is more specifically about the nighttime, like shutting it off.
It's more specific for unintended use of water and those resources. I'm fine for them to be accessible and open when needed. But I'm still a little leery of some things overnight. But it sounds like you have a good plan. So that answered my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to know what the future holds for YES, whether this group is going to continue, and what other projects are ahead.
Yes, we definitely have plans to continue. One of our upcoming goals that we've kind of discussed is potentially revising the document a little bit and taking it to the Monroe County Council to get a complimentary resolution passed by them. And then we've also communicated with other cities in Indiana and nearby that are interested in using our resolution as a basis for their own resolutions. And so we kind of want to possibly make this like a statewide movement.
Yes, so Jim Poyser, who's standing over here, he's already starting a statewide movement where many other cities in Indiana have passed climate resolutions, but ours, I think, so far has a little bit more teeth to it, where because Bloomington's kind of on the cutting edge usually in Indiana of sustainability, we felt that we could put a little bit more like oomph to our resolution. And so our resolution will hopefully be updated with even more intense, I guess, statements later. We're hoping that more high schoolers will pick it up and be like, yeah, this looks interesting. I'd like to do this as a project, as a side project, I guess. So we're just hoping it'll just keep expanding in that way too.
And given that Maddie and I will both be attending Indiana University next year, we plan to work to make IU and Bloomington increasingly sustainable as the future comes about.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? I had one. I'm very impressed because this is you took on such a challenging topic and a really serious one, and I wondered about the process and what you've learned in the process, and has it affected? Do you think that this will be maybe a future direction in your careers or your studies?
I don't see how, as like in our generation, I don't see how climate change can't be something that we think about as just people. All of us are going to have to address it at some point. I know Jarrett's probably going to be closer in a career path in the future.
Yeah, I'm planning to do something in the field of environmental policy, study that at Indiana University. So, and this resolution has been a big inspiration, and I think it's really fascinating for me to write the actual policy and have a hand in that. Definitely when we first went into it, we had this idea that we would present it and it would pass and it would be over, and now here we are over a year later, having gone to all these commissions and organizations and met with them and revised the document and gone back to them. It's really taught me a lot about the local government process, and I really think that that alone has made this whole process really worth it for me.
Thank you. So you've learned to be very patient, I'm sure. Okay, if there are no other questions, then we'll go to the public for comment on the Resolution 1911.
Daryl Bogus, I am pleased to support this resolution, which should come as no surprise from me. But to put it in a little perspective, this is a big problem that takes bold solutions at several levels: international, national, state, local, personal, corporate. At this time, national and state are more barriers than incentives. Fortunately, in this place, at this time, we have a good head start. Duke Energy provides most of the electricity in Bloomington. They also have operations in several other states, more than 60 counties in Indiana. They send a report every year to the State Utility Commission identifying in detail how many solar net metering customers they have and how big they are. Almost half of Duke's total for Indiana is in one county, right here. But the potential for solar power, it's almost unlimited. If you look at how many customers there are in a whole state, millions of them, and you do a ratio comparison of how many solar owners It's roughly 1 out of 1,000. It's 1/10 of 1%. And the problem we have in the State House is most of the representatives from other counties, they don't know anything about it. They don't see solar, they don't hear solar, they don't understand it. But even given that, at the State House, they have a much higher percentage of solar owners. 2 of our elected representatives, to my knowledge, have solar. And that's way more than 1 out of 1,000, but it's nowhere near enough for a majority of votes to pass legislation that is written by the utility companies. And a couple of years ago, it finally passed by a handful of votes. If a very few votes would have changed, we'd be in a different situation. But in Bloomington, we have leadership from the city, from the county. The state has about 50 solar churches in 92 counties. 7 solar churches are in Monroe County. They're not only in Monroe County, they're in the city of Bloomington, right here. Churches have members. The city is providing leadership by demonstrating you don't have to put it on the roof if you want to have solar. You can put it on the parking lot. Where you have a farmer's market, you can put them on the roof of the parking garages where the cars are parked. We are in a leadership position at this time in this state, and I think in the Midwest. We have several local solar companies that stay busy. We've had a dozen solar companies complete projects in Bloomington and Monroe County. They're from other parts of Indiana. They're from Kentucky and Ohio. They come here because this is a magnet. This is an oasis for solar energy. They like to work here because we understand it. We get it. We are already setting an example for the Midwest. This just puts icing on the cake. I commend you.
Thank you. Other public comment, please step up. And remember to state your name.
My name is Nidhi Krishnan, and I would like to speak in support of this motion. This isn't just a problem of environmental sustainability. I also see this as a social justice, racial justice, and economic justice issue, as climate change and the effects of that harm marginalized populations disproportionately. And I think that Bloomington is in a unique place where we have leadership that is willing to address the effects of climate change, and even if our national government or state government is not willing to take those bold steps, I hope that Bloomington can serve as an example for other cities. It's not just about Bloomington passing this for our own city, but I really hope that other cities will be emboldened by our example. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joelle Jackson. I just also want to speak in support of it. I think that speaking from experience and watching the pattern being a high schooler, it often feels like people don't take our voices seriously and we kind of lose our agency to make change as young people. And so it's really inspiring to see this resolution go so far. And I just want to say thank you for listening to the voices of the youth in the community, and also for caring so much about such important issues that really are going to decide our future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Sarah Brademeyer, and I would simply like to speak in support of this resolution. I think an excellent point was made that being a young person in this, with this issue, it's really difficult to not have this at the forefront of your minds, and so
this resolution gives me some hope for the future, and I think it's an extremely important issue to take into account. Thank you.
If people who want to speak could line up, it would be helpful.
I'm Angie Shelton. I'm a teacher at Bloomington High School North, the environmental science teacher where this originally got started. And so I just wanted to give a little background on how this started out. And we see two lead presenters here today, and I think Mr. Volan, you asked if they were speaking on behalf of the school. They're not speaking on behalf of the school in any formal regard, but there were approximately 150 students who started this resolution. So we started as a class project, but I have rarely seen a group of kids in a room so engaged in a topic as this. This is a topic that's in the forefront of their mind. I'm often asked, as teaching environmental science, do kids really care about climate change? Is this something they think about? Yes, it is. It is something they think about every day. And they ask me, why the heck are the adults not thinking about this? They come into this class often very disheartened and feeling like there's nothing we can do, it's hopeless, the government doesn't do anything, and it's really heartening to me and inspirational to see a group of kids who are actually doing something and learning that they can do something. So I just really want to encourage you all. They've gone through a year and a half or more of work in research and working with people in the community and talking to people and getting their support. Have toned down some of the resolutions a little bit, making them more realistic and feasible, but I don't think they've lost the idealism. So that I really hope you will vote to accept this resolution tonight and continue to inspire our next generation to be leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mady Hirschland. I received the first individual award from the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability last year and founded a number of organizations locally and in the state. I just want to deeply applaud all of your efforts and thank you for your leadership. You do inspire hope. This issue is incredibly important, and one of the most important things the research tells us is that we need to be talking about it, and that's what you all are doing. So I want to urge the council to support and approve this resolution. It's very, very important at this point in time for city governments to be taking the lead. As Daryl pointed out, the state and federal government right now aren't. But they will, and your leadership will make a huge difference. So thanks so much.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm not really the public, but if I may say a few words on behalf of the administration. Alex Crowley, Director of Economic and Sustainable Development, and I just wanted to commend the efforts and the enthusiasm and really the successful delivery of a resolution from this group. I know that they were involved in the Sustainability Action Plan discussions, and so this, even back then, was tying together. I think, as a lot of people have said, Bloomington is really a great leader in sustainability. The mayor is very committed to it, all of us are, and so we're very pleased to see this come up and love the idea, like in the budgeting process that youth have become involved in. We love the idea to see youth involved in policymaking like this. So we're very, very pleased and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Any other public comment? Please step up.
Hi, I'm Wes Kamenga. I have not prepared my comment, and I'm nervous, so please bear with me as I articulate what I want to say about this. So yeah, for one of the big things that this resolution is clearly about is climate change. For a long time, it's been understood that 2 degrees Celsius in terms of global temperature increase is bad. That's like the red line that we shouldn't cross. As a part of the Paris Agreement, there was a study commissioned on 1.5 degrees of warming that came out in October. And what the study basically said is that 1.5 degrees is really bad, 2 degrees is really bad, 2 degrees is much worse relative to 1.5. There's a stark difference. So we need to move decisively to get things under control as soon as we realistically can. And the only way to do that is through solutions that are deeply at odds with what politics has looked like for the past 20 or 30 years. That's the only way. You all are members of the generation that predominantly has political and economic power right now. And as members of that generation, you all have a choice to make. And the choice is either get on board with the idea of solutions that are, as I put it a moment ago, deeply at odds with what politics has looked like over the past 20 or 30 years. Either get on board with that, or you condemn your children and grandchildren to a horrible fate. And that may sound like hyperbole when people hear that kind of thing. It's very natural to want to dismiss it as hyperbole, but it's not hyperbole, it's just the truth. So, yeah.
Thank you for your comment. Any other takers? Thank you.
I'm Kathleen Boggess, former high school counselor at Bloomington North, and it always warms my heart when I see students really doing good things. I was at a meeting at IU a couple months ago, and a woman in the audience was asking Bob Salzberg something and making some derogatory comments about the current students at IU. And I could not resist standing up and saying, I have great hope. I counter what, or I support what Andy said. I have great hope for the future when it's in the hands of students like this. And I hope I live long enough to see some of you up here in these chairs, and better yet, to see you at the state legislature making those policy changes. So set your sights really high. You're doing a great job, and I really appreciate that you have worked hard on this. So I support the resolution.
Thank you for your comment. Yep, please step up.
Hi, my name is Bella Clemmer, and similarly to what she was just saying, I think that tonight has made it very clear that Bloomington is filled with amazing young people. The Boys and Girls Club and the people that just went before me and everyone in the audience who came to support this resolution have shown that Bloomington has a really bright future. And I think that we need to support the climate resolution to protect our future. Because Bloomington will be great in 2050 if we can keep protecting it with this resolution. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Darby Fitzsimmons. I'm a member of the Youth Participatory Budgeting Committee. And I stand in strong support of this resolution because I know there may be some people in this room, including, who say that our tax revenues could be spent on better things. But I can think of no better thing to spend it on than protecting our future, because I think everyone, all the youth in this audience would agree with me that we need strong, decisive action. So I hope everyone on the council will support this resolution with me, because I think that these resolutions are the only way we can secure our future at this point. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any others? Okay, gone. Back to council for final comment. Anyone like to make a comment? Councilmember Ruff.
Bravo to what the group of students has done tonight and been working on, not presented tonight, been working on for a long time. I will say that, as one of the last speakers noted, it can't be business as usual or politics as usual anymore. And so my advice at this point is don't be too polite and too politic. I'm looking at section number 5, where it talks about to reduce the number of automobiles used daily by high school students and parents. It talks about the city could begin this by adding trails off the B line, installing more pathways, protected bike lanes, and as Councilmember Sims wisely pointed out, those things all cost money. So there's other things, though, that can be done that are, it's easy for everyone, fairly easy for people to get on board for more bike lanes if they're affordable, if the funds are there. It's fairly easy to get. It's a little harder when you ask, we need to not accommodate and make it so easy for automobiles and for cars. That's the flip side of this. And there's a lot of research that shows that even when you have a lot of amenities for alternatives to driving, if driving is still really convenient and really easy, and parking is still really convenient and really easy, the vast majority of people will just continue business as usual, even if you've got. And it is definitely a much more difficult ask of society and of our generation, and maybe even your generation, to say, we're not going to make it as easy for you to be able to drive and park at school. Right? So I would say it's time has come to play hardball, and you are the ones to really start putting our feet to the fire. Thank you.
Other council comment? Councilmember Volin?
A number of thoughts tonight. It's been a really interesting evening. I think Greg Alexander was certainly right to critique the lip service we pay to bike infrastructure. But, you know, Little 500 is a student thing. It happens somewhere else. And we must be cutters who, you know, still prefer selling used cars and driving cars all over town like in the movie. We think of ourselves as a bike town, but are we really a bike town yet? This resolution certainly begins to question it. This is not an ordinance. This is not city code. So a resolution is just the stated will of the city. But this document can and should go along with our newly adopted comprehensive plan, our newly adopted transportation plan, our soon-to-be developed transportation demand management plan. We should be keeping in mind these recommendations when we consider every project that we're developing, and so should the other boards and commissions in the city that think about the built environment. The Plan Commission should be aware of this resolution. The Board of Zoning Appeals, they should all be thinking about what our priorities are. But it goes further than that. Yes, you have to go to the county. You don't just have to go to the county council, which is the fiscal body. We have to go to the county commissioners, which is the executive and the legislative body of the county, and get them to think differently about how they design and site buildings. We also have to go to the Monroe County Community School Corporation, which is a separate taxing entity not related to the city of Bloomington. It is its own elected organization. And this is where I come back to what I was saying and asking the presenters about this. You know, we need, two of our colleagues tonight are not here because they are in Louisville for the Congress for the New Urbanism. It's about talking about how basically cities and urban form are good. And the basic components of urban form are, number one, compactness. You don't build a giant building set back a mile from the street, surrounded by a giant swath of grass. You put it up next to the street. Two, mixture of uses. You don't build buildings that just do one thing. You try to have them do multiple things, or at the very least, you have them close to other types of city uses. I fondly remember hearing Councilmember Ruff talk about his days as a child going to McCalla School on 10th Street and being able to go across the street to the building that was Yogi's for a long time, where it was a general store and you could buy candy there. It was right across the street. How many schools in Bloomington are there where you can go from the front door and be at a business by going across the street or one block down? I would say the answer is very few. And finally, traditional neighborhood design, which means grids, not cul-de-sacs, and garages in back, not garages in front, more like the neighbors in the center of the city than on the edge. But most of all, tonight is about redefining terms, about questioning our assumptions about what is possible. You know, it is possible to get after the school corporation and say from now on, the next time you build or redesign one of your schools, that you bring it closer to the street, that you site it closer to the rest of the city, that you encourage a mixture of uses around it and make it like the schools that still exist in District 6, the Project School, which presented tonight, and Harmony School, which are in the city and close to things. And kids can actually imagine walking and not expecting that they have to be driven either by bus or by private car. But we need to go further and think about the terms that we've taken for granted. Why is it any surprise that students pulled off this resolution, this presentation? I represent a lot of college students, and I've stopped referring to non-students as adults, because college students can vote. They can vote for me. They can run for this job. A 19-year-old ran for this job in 1995. He lost, but he eventually won in 2007. He wasn't 19 anymore, but the point is he had experience running, and there's no reason why there isn't an 18-year-old on the city council, considering how many students there are in the city of Bloomington. You know, if we start by referring to people who are in high school and making presentations like this as students, and we stop short of calling them kids, maybe tonight's presentations are the kind of result you can expect. I don't call students kids anymore, even those who are not of the age of 18. They're perfectly capable of doing fine work. We've seen 2 examples of it tonight, and both of them concrete, well-researched work that anyone could be proud of. But if we continue to assume that students are children, or that children are somehow incapable of doing this kind of work, then we're going to get what we expect. So with that, I want to enthusiastically encourage that my colleagues vote for this. And I would also like to say that I expect at least one person who spoke at that mic tonight will be sitting here in 2050. Mark my words, watch this tape. Someone sitting in this room is going to be a city council member in our seat, and perhaps at that time they can revisit and see how well we did. I'm certainly looking forward to still being around, no matter how aged and crotchety I am, to witness that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont-Smith.
Yes, thank you all so much for bringing this resolution. There are some difficult things in here. I think I agree with Councilmember Ruff that, you know, it's time to take off the kid gloves and play rough, because this is your future we're talking about. I mean, climate change is an existential crisis, as I'm sure you all know. So there are a few things in here that are, you know, soft, and a few things that are a little more tough. You know, you have the contingent on funding. Bloomington will increase biking and walking accessibility. Well, we should do it. We should just prioritize that. We're working on that. There's something in here that I was a little surprised that Parks and Rec agreed to this, which is to plant trees of equal diameter breast height for every tree that is removed. I mean, if you remove a 40-year-old tree, it's going to be a pretty big tree. So they say that they're going to replace with same-size tree. I hope that's possible. I hope they do it. I understand why it's in there, because, you know, if you replace it by a seedling, it's not going to absorb the carbon that the original tree did. The other thing I highlighted here was in section 3 about the natural gas usage. It says, in addition, so first of all, we're going to cut by 15%. You know, that'll be our goal. In addition, the city of Bloomington will also increase the percentage of energy that's renewable for the next 10 calendar years by an average of 0.5% per year. So there again, you got some hard language in there. We will do it. So when I was asking, you know, what are you all going to do in the future, I was hoping that some of you would come back and remind us. Like I said to the project school students, you know, we're busy, we get bogged down in kind of mundane, everyday details. You know, I always appreciate when people come back and said, hey, 6 months ago you signed this thing, and what have you done? And also help us achieve these goals, because we need all the help we can get. I mean, I think everybody who spoke tonight and helped with this resolution is smarter than half of Congress. I mean, you guys are saving hope for politically in this country. And, you know, the higher levels are extremely frustrating. I mean, the whole, economic system that we have based on extraction and fossil fuels is extremely frustrating. But, most transformative human movements come from the ground up, and you guys are the grassroots, and so I have hope, and I think you should keep working, and I know we will as well. I want to leave with a quote from my hero, Greta Thunberg, 16-year-old Swedish activist. She has a lot of good things to say, and has no hesitation of speaking her mind. She's very brave, very smart, and I see, that in some of you as well. So here's just one quote of hers. She says, "Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We can't solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity. And if solutions within the system are so impossible to find, maybe we should change the system itself." So I thank you all for your hard work, and of course I'm going to support this.
Other council comment? Okay, I have a few things to say, and this is a great segue because I think changing the system is really what's required. And I think that it starts locally. It is happening, I think, on a national level. Certain countries are stepping up, but obviously our national government isn't right now, and so it's up to us. And so I think this is a great expression of that. And I'm very impressed that you've done the work, you've done the research, and then you did all this public outreach to all of these partners and got their support. And I realize it probably took a lot longer than you anticipated, and it was quite a lot of work, but I think it was worth it, definitely worth it. And I'll mention that in a moment. But back to the idea of changing everything, I really, the shortest whereas clause, the average Bloomington resident is burning over 20 metric tons of CO2 per year, really struck me because it really requires everybody stepping up, everybody having to re-examine their own habits, their own behavior. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to say, I'm not going to take that transatlantic flight because it's the equivalent of driving for years. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start eating locally, or I'm going to start eating a vegetarian diet because it's using far less fossil fuels than. And so these sorts of things are really tough for people to take on, but they're not as tough as a climate in complete disarray. And that's what we're seeing happen. And I think any skeptics are not going to be skeptics very long. I think that in a few years, everybody's going to have to admit that things are awry. Things are not the way they used to be. And things are changing and require action. So, and it's hard to redirect financing, even at a city level. But it is an emergency, as Councilmember Piedmont Smith said. It is a climate crisis. It is an emergency. But it's part of a bigger one, and I think it is about viewing the planet as an infinite resource. And it's not only climate change, even though that's our probably biggest problem, but it's deforestation and fishery collapse and coral reef bleaching and all the rest. So until we examine that and put the brakes on that, and we know ways in which we can do it, we can put the brakes on it and we can make that shift. As Councilmember Volin said, some resolutions are purely rhetorical, but this one is directive. So this is something that I see when we move forward with policy, such as the Sustainability Action Plan or the Comprehensive Plan. This will be part of what we look to in terms of making that policy. So this is really, really important, and it can't be underestimated. It's important. So I really appreciate the work and dedication that you've made to do this, and I will, of course, support it and be looking forward to using this in the future for policy decisions.
Call the question.
Okay, the question's been called and seconded on Resolution 1911. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rallo?
Yes.
Volin?
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
6-0.
It's adopted unanimously. Thank you so much. And thanks for staying so late. Okay, we'll move on now.
Mr. President, with the reading of this next resolution, I must apologize while the room is clearing out that I need to leave in order to join our colleagues who are in Louisville for the Congress of New Urbanism. So I will read resolution. I will ask that Resolution 1912 be introduced and read by title and synopsis, and I will depart after the introduction. Need a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Resolution 1912 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 1912, to review and approve the intra-category transfer and expenditure of $100,000 or more within a covered fund under Ordinance 1810, additional fiscal oversight by the Common Council, regarding a $250,000 transfer from line 399, other services and charges, to line 396, grants, within the Housing Trust Fund, number 905, and expenditures of transferred funds. Synopsis reads as follows. This resolution is submitted in accordance with Ordinance 1810, additional fiscal oversight by the Common Council, and proposes the transfer of $250,000 from line 399, other services and charges, to line 396, grants, within the Housing Trust Fund, and the expenditure of those funds to support an affordable housing project. This received no committee recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 1912 be adopted. Good night.
Second.
All right. Ms. Sims, will you be presenting?
Yes, I will.
Wonderful.
Good evening. I am Doris Sims, the Director of Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. And as you know, the City Council passed a resolution last year requiring any intra-category transfers of $100,000 or more to be approved by the City Council. So I'm here tonight asking your approval for the intra-category transfer of funds within the Housing Trust Fund. I am requesting a transfer of $250,000 from other services and charges line 399 to line 396, the grants line item. This request is being requested due to the funds being dispersed can be reported to the State Board of Accounts as a grant versus a loan or any other type of funding. These funds will be used for, as you know, the project that's currently under construction on Crescent Road to Mecca Companies. We awarded $500,000 in funding to that project. $250,000 of that will be in the form of a grant, and the other $250,000 will be in the form of a loan. That project has over 146 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Of those, 70% or 102 of the units will be affordable to households at 60% or less of median income for 30 years, and then another 50 of those units will be affordable to households for the next 69 years. So I'm available for any questions that you might have, as well as members from the Controller's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Are there questions for the Resolution 1912? Any questions? Okay, we'll go to the public then. Any public comment? We have far less public now. We're back to council for a final comment or a recommendation. Councilmember Sandberg.
Absolutely in support. This is the kind of housing we need. This is a commitment we've already made, and so this is housekeeping as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
I agree. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I just would like to thank Ms. Sims and Jeff. I knew the name was Jeff, but I didn't know your last name.
And Kevin Kerr.
And anybody from the staff who is here after 3.5 hours of our other business tonight. So I do appreciate you being here in case of questions. And I think it is important that we have this public process when there are funds that will be used at this level that were not in the previous budget. So in this case, I agree with Councilmember Sandberg that it's pretty much a housekeeping issue, but I think it's an important process to have because there may be other issues where there are transfers which have much more interest from the public. So thank you for being here.
Great. Is there a recommendation?
Call the question.
Second.
Okay, question's been called and seconded on Resolution 1912. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Ruff,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes. Resolution 1912 is adopted 5-0. Who is serving as parliamentarian?
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 19-09 be introduced by the clerk, be written, introduced by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Yeah, I knew I'd get it.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Resolution 1909 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 1909, authorizing the allocation of Jack Hopkins Social Service Program funds for the year 2019 and related matters. The synopsis reads as follows. This resolution brings forward the recommendations of the 2019 Jack Hopkins Social Services Funding Program Committee. The principal task of the committee is to recommend funding for local social services agency proposals that best meet program criteria and best meet the needs of the community. This resolution allocates a total of $313,193 to 27 different agency programs. The resolution also approves the funding agreements with these agencies, accepts the report of the committee, and authorizes the chair of the committee to resolve any questions regarding the interpretation of the agreements. This had no committee recommendation.
I move that Resolution 19-09 be adopted.
Second.
Okay. Who shall present? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
In the absence of the Jack Hopkins Committee Chair, Ms. Chopra, I will just give a very brief summary. So the committee met several times this spring, issued a call for applications in March, received 30 applications, I believe, and heard from 27 agencies and then granted funds to 27 agencies in the amount of $313,193. Note that this includes the $305,000 budgeted for 2019, but it also includes some leftover funds from previous years in the amount of $8,193 from last year. I really don't think that I need to read through all of the awards, but I will point out that we did have several collaborative proposals, which we always like to see, and that there were a few new agencies that applied for funding and received funding. Made Up Mind, Courage to Change Sober Living. These are ones that we haven't heard from in the past. St. Vincent de Paul Society, and also the Special Olympics of Indiana. So it was a good process, always difficult when you have a lot more requested than you have to give. But I will also, open it up to Councilmember Sandberg and Councilmember Ruff, who also served with me on the committee, if they want to add anything.
Please do.
Thank you. We've
Sandberg.
heard some very important things this evening, and so I don't want to give this short shrift, even though the hour is late. Serving on the Jack Hopkins Committee, I think this is another very important funding that this city does. These are Bloomington tax dollars that go to support nonprofit organizations that are helping with the social equity piece that we all talk about with respect to quality of life in this community. And what I was most struck by in this year's round of Jack Hopkins, and these are always hard decisions, but as we have a good amount of money to allocate, actually more than we have in the CDBG funding, there was a lot of variety in the requests this year. And while we don't want to read the entire list, it does run the gamut from support to older adults in this community. Very interesting to be able to help support the new community center, the senior center. that will be opening out. I believe it's still going to be on the east side. We always have good youth development programs that come before us, and that is so critically important, as we've seen tonight. The young people in our community that really do contribute to our quality of life and our future. We've had programs that provide food that are always the mainstay of social service provision, housing projects that are working very diligently to make sure our housing stock is increased, workforce development programs, and this is one of the new ones where we're dealing with a center that's going to help with helping people get employed who have a difficult time getting employed. Obviously, New Leaf, New Life has been doing anti-recidivism programs for a while, but we have a newcomer in Made Up Mind. We have recovery community services in here, special populations, again, Special Olympics was new this year, Volunteers in Medicine, Wheeler Mission, homelessness provision. The whole range of social need in this community is met in a fairly significant way by the public investment in the Jack Hopkins Social Services Fund. It's important. It's another important investment in the kind of community we want. And again, just goes to speak to Bloomington's commitment. And that's a definite source of pride for all of us up here on the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ruff, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay. Are there questions from council members? Councilmember Sims, do you have any questions? I had one about the total. What was the total request? So the funding was $313,000, a little over. What was the total request that was made? I'm just trying to determine the percent that we were able to
know that that's in this packet anywhere, and I don't have my Jack Hopkins information with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's always obviously more than the $313,000 that we have. And so what we often have to do as we eliminate some of the agencies that did come forward because they didn't quite meet the criteria, it's for low income individuals, and it's for Bloomington residents primarily. But then we have to go about the business of looking at their priorities that they asked for in their grant and then kind of cutting and maybe only giving them their top tier asks as a way to get it down to where we allow as many of these organizations to get funded as we possibly can.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the figure.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Well, I was able to pull up the figure from the 27 agencies that made it to the second round, so to speak, and that was $462,845.
Okay. Well, that's a significant
So we did a
portion.
good chunk of it.
Yes.
I read from the resolution that by the time of our deadline, application requests mounted to $617,394.
That's the original request?
Yes.
Prior to second round?
According to the resolution.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Other questions? No? Okay. We'll go to the public. Seeing no public, we're back to...
Call the question.
Second.
Okay, the question's been called and seconded on Resolution 1909. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Ruff,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Resolution 1909 is adopted 5-0.
Mr. President, I move that Resolution 19-10 be read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Resolution 1910 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 1910, waiving current payments in lieu of taxes, pilot by the Bloomington Housing Authority to the city. Synopsis reads as follows. This resolution waives the right of the city of Bloomington to receive payments in lieu of taxes from the Bloomington Housing Authority for the year 2018. It received no committee recommendation.
Thank you.
I move that Resolution 19-10 be adopted.
Second.
Ms. Sims?
Again, I'm Doris Sims with the City of Bloomington Housing Neighborhood Development Department. And also here tonight is Amber Scobie, who is the Director of the Housing Authority. And this resolution, as one that is brought forth to you every year, is to forgive the pilot payment of the Bloomington Housing Authority. The amount of the pilot payment that is requested for this year is $35,365. As you know, you'll consider a resolution later on, after this one, to do a continuous forgiveness of the pilot. So this will be the last time you see me presenting this,
Very good. Thank
at
you.
least this year.
Yeah. Ms. Scobie, do you have anything to add?
Amber Scobie, Executive Director of the Bloomington Housing Authority. So we are subject to calculate the pilot and ask for forgiveness as long as we continue serving low-income families, for which we do. We maintain almost full occupancy in our public housing. About 85% of our households are considered extremely low income, with a median income of around $7,000. We spend this money on resident services, such things as supporting our Crestmont Ferguson Boys and Girls Club, our Back to School Bash, which gives school supplies to our kids in the public housing communities. We support a women's-only health fair called Wonder Women. We're supporting some summer camp scholarships for our kids this year. And also a new one is providing free Wi-Fi access to about 15 of our families. It's something that we're piloting right now. So by forgiving this pilot, it's more money that we can put back into those resident service programs. So thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Okay. Seeing none. Public? Seeing no public. Any comment from council? Councilmember Sandberg.
This was all very thoroughly discussed at our last Committee of the Whole, and so please forgive us if we don't have questions or a lot more to add, but it was very well explained and sounds like a very good thing for us to do. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Second.
Question's been called and seconded on Resolution 1910. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ruff,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Resolution 1910 is adopted 5-0.
Mr. President, I move Resolution 19-08 be read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Resolution 1908 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 1908 to approve a revised cooperation agreement between the City of Bloomington, City, and the Bloomington Housing Authority, BHA, for provision and operation of low-income housing units and associated payment in lieu of taxes by BHA in exchange for city services. The synopsis reads as follows. The Bloomington Housing Authority is requesting the council's approval of a revised cooperation agreement between the City of Bloomington and the Bloomington Housing Authority, BHA. The revision is required because the BHA will be participating in the Federal Rental Assistance Demonstration, RAD program, which will allow the BHA to secure funding for necessary repairs and renovations to its units. The RAD program requires the BHA to change its ownership structure, and the cooperation agreement is being revised to reflect that change in structure and extend the tax savings provided for in the cooperation agreement to the additional owner entities. Cooperation agreement also provides for the city to waive its right to payment in lieu of taxation, pilot, for a period of 40 years. This received a committee recommendation of due pass 7-0.
Thank you.
I move Resolution 1908 be adopted.
Second.
Ms. Scobie.
Amber Scobie, Executive Director of the Bloomington Housing Authority. I'm bringing this cooperation agreement for a revision. It was first drafted in 1961, and just to quickly summarize the need for the changes. One, it's outdated. There's language in there that talks about the development of public housing in the early 1960s, and as an agency, we're just in a lot different point right now. We're renovating that housing. And we're also using some financing tools that aren't just strictly money coming from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development or maybe city resources, which were used at the time. Another piece is adding different partners to the cooperation agreement. So we're asking to add our 501c3 Summit Hill Community Development Corporation, which is wholly owned and governed by the Housing Authority. The same Board of Commissioners also serve as directors for that. And also adding a tax credit investor that's to be determined to that agreement, just so that they're also being able to have the pilot forgiveness. And then lastly, one of the main reasons that we use the cooperation agreement is that pilot, which we just had the resolution for. So by allowing that 40-year forgiveness, it gives us a lot of predictability and certainty in the financing as we're getting ready to go through some major renovations and putting the financing plans together through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. So last week I brought to you a presentation, and I have a paper copy of that available, which we can go through if you have any questions, and I'll submit it for the minutes for the record.
Very good. Thank you.
And then I also want to add that we did have a slight language change on page 3 of the cooperation agreement. And Amanda Stevens, our Housing Authority attorney, will talk about that just briefly.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Stevens from Ferguson Law and also representative of the Bloomington Housing Authority with respect to the cooperation agreement. So if you go to the 2019 cooperation agreement in your packet and you go to page 3, section 5, you will see where it says cooperation agreement between municipality and local authority for project. So as Amber Scobie has discussed, this cooperation agreement only covers the renovations. At this time that this agreement was drafted in 1961, you can imagine at the time BHA was acquiring property. So this agreement only covers the renovations. Hence, this is a language that needs to be taken out. So where it says in the first sentence under section 5 on page 3, during the period commencing with the date of the, and then strike acquisition of any part of the site or sites, or, so it will read, during the period commencing with the date of the renovation of any project. So that is the change that needs to be made before this is signed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Procedurally, Mr. Sherman, do we need to act on that change? Do we need to offer an amendment to change or not?
No. It was mentioned now, so it's on the record, and there'll be an agreement that's signed by the president of the council and the mayor and other parties, and that one will be correct. That'll be attached to the resolution. So no, there doesn't have to be any formal motion accepting that change.
Okay, very good. Simple then. Are there questions for Ms. Scobie, Ms. Stevens, or Ms. Guthrie? Council? No public. So back to council for any final comment on resolution 1908. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Again, this is something else that I'm happy to support. And I want to thank the staff for explaining and making the changes and making it clear to us. As Councilmember Sandberg has previously stated, this is the type of housing that we're looking for in order to help our housing inventory. One of the many different sections or type of housing that we need. And I know it's a lot of hard work for staff out there, and it's from the federal government down, it's a whole new process. Something that I think we're getting used to. Initially, I wasn't as comfortable with the 40-year agreement but I don't see a real reason not to, because I think it enhances what we're trying to do. So thank you very much, and I'll support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I also want to thank Ms. Scobie and Ms. Stevens for making clear a very convoluted process with numerous acronyms and processes that most people cannot understand. Sometimes I think that in the realm of affordable housing, you know, people try to kill you with 1,000 cuts because it's so dense in bureaucracy that it deters all but the most determined. So thank you for being among the most determined, and I think this will be a good way for you to continue providing quality housing for people who need it in our communities. So I'm very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call the question?
Well, I have nothing to add, but just to remind us, you did, Councilmember Sandberg, that this was reviewed at a council work session, and it was also reviewed at a committee of the whole last time. So we had extensive conversation. So with that, recommendation?
Call the question.
Okay. Question's been called and seconded on Resolution 1908. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Resolution 1908 is adopted 5-0. Thank you very much for your patience this evening. We have no legislation for first reading. We have no public, I think, for additional public comment on items not on our agenda. No? No takers? All right. Well, darn it. Council schedule, Mr. Sherman?
Yes, 2 matters. The public safety, just reminders. One is the public safety local impact committee is meeting tomorrow night at 6 p.m. in this room to continue its discussions and decisions regarding how they're going to handle the public safety local income tax actions or this review this summer. And otherwise, after a very long night and a very long spring and winter session, you are going into your recess tonight. And yeah, and we'll come back with a regular session, a council work session on Friday, July 19th. There'll be deadline for legislation on the 22nd, a packet that goes out on the 26th of July, and a regular session followed by a committee of the whole on July 31st. So that's our known schedule for after the recess. Thank you.
Terrific. Do we have a motion for adjournment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.